the racist graffiti that was splashed across the screen earlier tonight. Yes, that happened here in Newburyport. If you're still sitting here feeling upset like I am, I want to validate your feelings. I am with you. I have 2 daughters of color at the Bres, and I also work as a support coordinator for families at Newburyport Youth Services. Tonight, I'm here to advocate for the economically disadvantaged students and families in our community. When we think in terms of equity, which we know is different than equality, and who should be prioritized for in-person learning, our schools have an obligation to act as a safety net for children who need it, and to also try to address the inequities that exist in our school system. Prior to the pandemic, our NPS district data collected by the Department of Ed shows that low-income students have fallen behind their peers in terms of academic performance. In our community, there are large academic achievement gaps for low-income students who make up roughly 9.5% of our student body. Consider the following data points. Only 66.7% of low-income students graduated in 4 years, compared to 93.2% of all students. Only 28.1% of low-income students completed advanced placement courses, compared to 63.8% of all students. 3.4% of low-income students dropped out of school in our community, compared with only 0.7% of all students. These disparities start in elementary school and continue through each school and each grade. With pandemic remote learning this spring, the achievement gap between low-income students and their peers is very likely further widened. Although I am thankful that our schools acknowledge that some students should be prioritized for 4 days of in-person learning, such as students with disabilities, English language learners, students who are homeless, the data shows that low-income students are already falling behind, and we have an obligation to make them a priority too. I've had the honor of working with many lower-income families in our community, and although many of them are incredibly resilient and creative problem solvers, they are stressed and struggling. They do not have the means to hire nannies or tutors or access to highly resourceful neighborhood pod communities either. Low-income students will fall even further behind compared to their peers. They need more support from the school community. They need help keeping their kids safe.
Trish, can I ask you to summarize
Sure.
your final point? Thank you.
Please, the data is clear. Low-income families and students need more support from the school. Please include economically disadvantaged students in your prioritized populations so that they're able to attend school 4 days a week for in-person learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Trish. Looks like Councilor Tantar is double dipping.
He's already spoken.
Elizabeth.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Elizabeth, can you give us your address?
Yeah, my name is Elizabeth Goulla. I live at 9 Marquand Lane in Newburyport. I do want to echo what Trish was saying. I absolutely agree we should prioritize low-income families in Newburyport. And I also want to say that I do support the teachers as well. As a nurse, I remember in the beginning of this, working with COVID patients and how scary it is to be in the beginning and not know what's going to happen. I actually do feel reassured by this plan. I think that it sounds very thought out. It sounds like you're listening to expert reports, opinions, important. We all have what we think would be our ideal. Honestly, this plan is not the ideal for my personal child in my personal situation, but I don't expect Newburyport Public Schools to be able to do that. So I actually am reassured by the plans. If you do go back fully with all the students, and the idea is just to push as many students into the schools as possible, we will definitely be opting out of that. I would like to see, as Jessica Sue said, what's going to happen when we go back. And you know, if people do get sick, it's very easy to say, you know, number-wise, it might be really small. But if it's your child or your teacher, it's not going to seem so small. And the only other thing I do want to mention is I do have some concerns over the plan for the masks and what the guidelines or requirements are going to be for what is a suitable mask. As a nurse, everyone who comes in our hospital gets a surgical mask. Be it an employee, a patient, a visitor, you get a surgical mask. Even if you come in with a surgical mask on, we give you one so that we can be sure that everybody is wearing a mask that is appropriate to prevent transmission. And these kids are going to be sitting in the same room with like a a dozen other people for hours on end. I think it's important that they have appropriate masks. I would prefer that we give out certain masks to everybody every single day, but yeah, so that's my only real concern is what the requirements or guidelines are going to be about what, a cloth mask can be just about anything. And that's it. And I do want to say thank you to all of the people who worked on this plan. Like I said, it is reassuring, but I definitely want to say that I stand with the teachers, and honestly, if they're really concerned, I stand with the teachers. Thank you.
Elizabeth, thank you very much. Mr. Cooper? Sam? Thank you. Mr. Cooper?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Sam Cooper, and I'm from 5 William Hall Drive in Newburyport.
Thank you. You can feel free to talk.
Good evening, Newburyport. I am very involved as a school leader and am entering my senior year at Newburyport High School. My freshman year, I entered the school nervous and timid. In such a short period of time, I was able to grow so much and found a place with teachers and peers where I could comfortably grow and learn. NHS I came to learn is a special place because it keeps us sane. It allows kids to be out from what might be going on at their homes to socialize and grow. It forces children to face positive social pressures that can't be replicated online. It teaches us how to contribute to society and become passionate leaders who evoke change in a challenging world. It allows us to shape our futures in any way we may desire. Overall, getting kids back into the building is crucial not only for our fragile mental health, but most importantly for the betterment of our generation as a whole. In a city and state that is doing so excellent when compared to the rest of the nation, we must lead the cause and show millions of people that a hybrid learning plan can be done safely and successfully. While entering the building presents risks, I trust that our teachers, administrators, and most importantly students will do everything they can to treat this situation seriously. By keeping us in our dark and lonely basements for extended periods of time, our worst fears will become more of a reality each day. Something worse than a life and death situation. A complete generation of kids that lack social skills, increased mental fragility, a decrease in passion for learning and doing, but most importantly, a failure to be able to contribute to a changing world. Again, I must reemphasize that continuing to increase getting kids into the school in a normal classroom setting is definitely attainable in a safe way. I love all my teachers, and they know that, and I know that they know my peers are mature and capable of fulfilling in-classroom learning. Again, the positives of keeping us in school far outweigh the negatives. Thank you all so much, and when voting, please think about the youth and what this means for our futures.
Thank you, Sam. Juliet Walker?
Good evening. I'll keep it brief because a number of folks already said what I was going to say. I live on Eagle Street in Newburyport. I have one child at the Knock and one at the high school. And I want to voice my support for the reopening plan, acknowledging that it's not perfect, but that I feel it's very important that we unify behind the decision makers that we have tasked with this decision making. And above all, I want to say that I support our educators. I feel you are in the crosshairs, and it's very unfortunate to be in that situation. I also want to say that I understand as a parent, each of us has personal circumstances, and this is a very emotional decision for a lot of us. But I think we need to put our personal situations aside and support the reopening plan as it is proposed, with the caveat that I really want us to focus on the families and students that are at extra risk and don't have the support services at home that they will need to get through this troubled time. And above all, I just want us to remember that we need to unite as a community. None of us brought this pandemic on, but we're all trying to make it through. So while we all may have different opinions about this, I hope we can move forward together, whatever is decided. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet. Pat Fuller? Pat, can you hear us? And have you asked her to unmute? Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Pat, how are you?
Oh, good, thank you.
Yeah, if you could just give us your address.
I'm at 24 Eagle Street, and I've got a child entering 8th grade and a child entering her junior year in high school. I just want to say that I support a lot of what you guys have done so far in the plan, especially the K through 8. I think it looks like it was very well thought out, and there was a great plan in place. And like somebody said earlier, it seemed like there was a plan to move forward for the next steps. The problem I have is the high school, and I'd like to at least acknowledge Lynn, Brendan, Rick, and a few others, and kind of back what they say, and I don't want to repeat what they had said. The issue that I have is that you guys set the bar so high with going back to school that I find it hard for what Dr. Sue said, that yeah, this is for 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks we're going to go and reassess this. The problem is you guys have already set this bar at a certain standard, 6 feet distancing and all the other stuff, which is fine, except there are state guidelines that allow for lower than 6 feet. And so my question is, and this is what the problem I have with their plan, is I don't see how you get to the next step of having a full hybrid with half the kids there, et cetera, with those higher guidelines than the state standards. And one thing I'll notice too, Sean Gallagher, that you mentioned about the 3 feet distancing, I was just reading the state guidelines. I don't see anywhere in there that specifically says, hey, if you're eating or if you're standing next to somebody, or if you're doing something and you're gonna have to take your mask off for a quick second, you have to be 6 feet apart. It's not in the guidelines. I'm not sure where that's coming from, but I'd like to see whatever plan we have going forward actually have steps and have there be a plan showing what the next steps are, because right now I don't see it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Pat. TC? TC, I think we can hear you.
Hello.
Yep.
Am I being heard?
Yes, you are. If you could just give us a name and address. Am I being heard?
Okay, yes, TC Gannon, 5 Tracy Street. As a classroom teacher in another Cape Ann district, I believe it's a priority for students to return to school in person. I'm going to make 2 points. One, education is driven by personalities and relationships. By March of this year, when Newburyport Public Schools transitioned to remote learning, teachers and students had established relationships with one another that allowed everyone to function in the new reality as best they could given the difficult circumstances. Quite honestly, in our district, I'd probably give it a D. We don't fail in schools, we give effort. We gave effort, but it wasn't good. We are now beginning a new school year, and new relations need to be formed and cultivated in conjunction with new subjects, new expectations, new grading criteria, etc. It is a critical time in the school year that dictates how the rest of the school year is going to unfold. In my opinion, it's easier to scale down from in-person schooling than scaling up from remote learning, especially if relationships have been established. Point number 2. In regards to high school scheduling issues the administrators have highlighted, this posture looks binary. Either it's remote or full in person. Again, I say go with in person. I teach in one of the state's smallest districts where the middle school and high school share a building and rooms, faculty and staff members. We have very difficult scheduling issues that they are overcome year after year. You may not be able to buy an application to solve your problems. You may have to rely on a consultant or a faculty member with an analytical mind to create a schedule for this unprecedented time. For example, one year we had a 13-day schedule with an XYZ elective exploratory rotation to meet the students' scheduling needs. I emphasize the students' scheduling needs, not the schools, the students' scheduling needs. Students and parents may have to live with the realities that taking 3 different level of classes may not work. You may have to take all honors courses or all college prep, or perhaps all AP to make it work. That's what has to be done. So in closing, Newburyport Public Schools need to begin the school year full in person. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrea Herold.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Andrea, if you could just give us your address.
Hi, so 36 Moulton Street, and my name is actually Lauren Sargent.
I'm sorry?
My name is Lauren Sargent,
Okay, thank you.
and I live at 36 Moulton. Okay.
Great.
So I am the mother of 2 elementary age children, and I also have my master's in elementary education and previously taught first grade in another district. And I would like to echo support of Councilor Teed and Madam Cooper and Trish and all the people who are in support of having a in-person opportunity for our children. I understand that a tremendous amount of work went into these plans, both the hybrid and the remote model. And I mean no disrespect, but I think that they are completely inadequate for students of all ages, and particularly elementary age children. It's obviously not appropriate for students who have special learning needs, students who are below grade level, students who are struggling to make adequate progress, or students who are unable to attend just hours on a computer screen, which happens to be probably most children. Both the hybrid and the remote model is also essentially asking parents to leave their jobs and homeschool part-time. No matter how many efforts have been put into remote learning and to make it better than it was, which is appreciated, I think we would be kidding ourselves if we thought that it was at all adequate. If we are truly thinking about what is best for our children, we would acknowledge that a hybrid and remote learning is not anywhere appropriate for them to not have a completely lost school year of learning, and that any amount of time in person is extremely valuable. And I don't think it's fair to brush this current plan off as being for just a couple of weeks and say, oh, well, we'll figure it. You'll have a new plan in a few weeks, because if this plan is being proposed took 2 months to create, I don't know how we're going to create a new plan in the first 2 weeks of school. I think that if you start conservative, you're never going to get them back in school. And I think that would be a horrible thing. So I'm in complete support of having as much in-person school as possible, because I don't see it happening any other way further on in the year. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andrea. Angela is next.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mark Andrea. I'm just riding the Zoom coattails of my wife, Angela. We live at 23 T Street, and we have 3 children, 2 in the res. And my questions relate to the Remote Learning Academy. But before I get into this, I just want to thank all of the leaders that have put forth the tremendous effort that has gone into these plans. I've spent the last several years as the CEO of an education organization with dozens of schools across several states, employing thousands of teachers. And I've remained the chair of this organization through the crisis, and just have profound appreciation for what you've all been through. So with that, while I thought Assistant Superintendent Vic did a really admirable job of articulating the Remote Learning Academy plan, I do have these questions. They boil down to just how children will be treated as it relates to sort of classroom composition, teachers, and how they may expect to reintegrate into the classroom. So specifically, what district instructors are leading this effort? How were they selected? We're curious about that. Will children be expected to have a dedicated classroom, or will they, for example, just be bulked into grade levels? And while I realize this question is difficult to answer in the absence of clarity about enrollment, what will the ratios be, student to teacher, and what sort of engagement from a direct perspective can they expect? So our feeling is just lots of really pertinent questions not fully addressed, and in the absence of answers to those, I feel it's rather unreasonable to expect families to take a position on this by Wednesday. So our hope and our request would be simply to try to provide more information such that we can make an informed decision in advance of Wednesday. And last, before I cede the floor here, I just want to also say that I stand So thank you.
Thank you. Beth?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Beth, if you could just give us your address.
Sure, I'm Beth Trach. I live at 144 Low Street. Not gonna lie, my son, who is a rising junior at Newburyport High School, had a really horrible time with this spring's remote learning. And I don't want to go into too much detail for his privacy's sake, but it was a very difficult time for our family. That said, I was so encouraged by the thought that clearly went into the plan, in particular for the high school, because that's where my last kid going through the system is. And in particular, I was really struck by the attention to the social emotional learning component, which is in the learning standards of the frameworks for health. And so it's valid learning. I feel like sometimes it's really easy to think that that's just something extra. But especially with the losses we've suffered at the high school, I was very pleased that that was a focus. When we delivered the news to my son that, hey, it looks like you might be remote for most of it for the beginning, it was hard to hear, but he said, and he did not want to tell me this himself, even though I asked him to, but he said, I think it's fine, because the most important thing is that there's structure, and that was the struggle. He's like, if I get up and Zoom into class and I see my friends and we work together and I see my teachers every day on schedule, that's what's gonna make it doable. And he felt good about it. And I just wanted you to hear, because I think there are many families who are supportive of this. And I also wanted to echo that I was very pleased to hear from Mixed Timmons' teacher's perspective. I wanna honor that. They're in the trenches, they're the ones who have to do the work, and they're the ones who are taking on all the risk of seeing kids however much we can get them in there. I think it makes sense to be cautious, I think it makes sense to go slow, and I trust Mr. Wolf and the experts at the high school when they tell us what's gonna work in that building. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. Kristin Beauparl?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Kristin, if you could give us your address.
Yep, Kristin Beauparl, 10 Eagle Street in Newburyport, obviously. I just wanted to say a couple things. I have a daughter that's going to be a senior and a son that is going to be a freshman at the high school. I am also a nurse, so I feel as though I don't know, I'm a little struggled with the plan as far as the high school goes. I was one of the people that back in March or so got redeployed from my lovely little outpatient job to be an ICU nurse in a COVID unit. It wasn't something I signed up for or was able to vote on. It was something that I was, as an essential worker, something I needed to do. It was a very difficult time, obviously. I had to just make a decision on who I got to see and who I got to spend time with. And I understand the difficulty for teachers as well in this becoming an essential role and having to kind of take on some responsibilities that are very uncomfortable to them, because I myself had to do that as well. I just feel as though some of the things that are proposed, again, agreeing with some of the other parents as far as the distancing and things like that, not being able to take a drink of water. And I just feel like, I hate to say far-fetched or exaggerated, but, having spent 10 hours in the ICU room with a COVID patient, and then coming out of the room, and we would sit at our desks, and we would be able to take our masks down to take a sip of water. There are definitely ways that we were able to eat our lunch without our masks on. I feel a little discouraged about some of the reasons for not being able to go back. Do I agree in a full everyone back in school, hunky-dory, no masks, no anything? Of course not. And I understand the risks that some of this, these things pose, but I also do feel as though we've had time to kind of prepare for this. And I do worry mainly because by not starting, at all in person, I find it hard that we're ever going to make it to any sort of model that would allow our children to go back to school with flu season coming, you know, and that's my main concern, is also seeing the flu season coming. And yeah, that's all I have to say. But I do appreciate everyone's time and effort. Again, my children's father is a teacher in the school, middle school, but I do fully support the kids being back in school. We also had a very tough experience with the remote learning last spring as well, and I do have great concerns about continuing that into the fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristin. Matthew?
Oops, hi, sorry, I was muted.
That's okay, Matthew. Can you give us your address?
Matt Mars, 17 Marlborough Street. I just wanted to voice my support for the teachers, and echoing what Dr. Sue said. Honestly, I understand it's difficult, but to me it makes no sense to not bring back or not start in a remote capacity and then see where it goes, because as was echoed multiple times by the experts tonight, it is a constantly changing situation. So it doesn't make any sense to me, coming from an emergency planning background, to subject a decent amount of our community to a potential viral threat. I understand the difficulties with learning, but I think we should trust our teachers. They've put a lot of effort into developing new remote content, and I think we should allow them to use it and then monitor the situation as it progresses. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Megan Kinsey? I think you're up, Megan.
Hello, Megan Kinsey, One Griffin Court. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking my comments. I have 3 sons in the school district, an 8th grader, a junior, and a senior at the high school. I am in support of moving to a true hybrid and ultimately an in-full-person learning model as soon as possible, in consideration of our rating by the state as being at the lowest risk. I have a master's in education, and I'm a former 6th grade teacher in Chelsea, Massachusetts. And education is a full hands-on job. Anything less is just that, it's less. I do, though, want to thank the administration and committee for working thus far in creating this plan. However, in support of Councilor Zeeb's comments and then Committee Member Reardon's follow-up comments and questions to the chair, I do want to encourage the committee tonight to add to the debate a very specific timeline to be laid out in the plan for the high school for when more in-person learning can be added to the schedule before a vote is taken. It is imperative that terms like a couple or a few weeks be stricken from the conversation and a concrete plan be added. A very specific timeline be laid out as part of the document before a vote be taken. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan. Mark? Mark has been asked to unmute. Let's go with Jay. We'll come back to Mark.
Sorry about that. This is Mark.
Oh, it is Mark.
This is Mark Oil, 37 Plummer Ave, Newburyport.
Great, thank you, Mark. If you would go ahead. I got the address. Mark, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because I don't know if you were talking and not coming across, but we didn't hear anything.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. We can.
Oh, okay, sorry about that. There we go. So it's Mark Doyle, 37 Plummer Ave, and I'm the parent of a high school junior. And what I wanted to call about was, it seems to me like one of the things that's missing in the plan is there are options for the students to decide that they don't want to go to school, not don't want to go to school, but are concerned about health concerns. But it seems like one of the things that is missing is the option for the teachers. And what I'd like to see in the plan is some way for, even if the students are going to be in class, if you have teachers that are either at high risk or live with someone at high risk, I'd like to see the school district offer them an opportunity to be able to remote teach. So even if the kids are in the classroom, can we put a monitor in there so that if you have, I didn't catch the teacher's name earlier, but if you have a situation like that where they have a concern at home, that we address that so that we can make everybody inclusive as far as the options that are available.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
Jay Lannini.
Hi, Bruce.
Hi, Jay. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? You guys look great in your masks.
Thank you.
Jay Lannini, 26 Summer Place. First of all, thank you all for the work that's been put in. Teachers, administrators, school committee members, city councilors, the mayor. Everyone's done a fantastic job. We are picking from the worst, best solution to this problem. And that comes with challenges. And I was not trained as an engineer, but all my engineer friends have given me this sound advice. Measure twice, cut once. In terms of the opening of the schools, I like the fact that we are taking a conservative approach. I understand the approach of the parents who are eager to have their kids back in the schools, but why don't we measure twice and cut once? I think that's wise. I do share the concerns of the parents who want to see what the transition plan will be once we figure out that the schools are safe, which I'm hoping will happen. But it's, these are challenging times, and what I would encourage everyone to do who's spoken on this phone is to get together, chat, stay friendly. Let's figure something out that's going to work for everybody. I know it's hard. My son's a senior this year. I never pictured this as his final education experience and what's been a wonderful experience for him with the Newburyport Public Schools, but it is what it is. So let's get together, let's rally, and make sure that we all have a positive experience. So thank you all.
Thank you, Jay. Chris?
Hi there, Chris Duchesne, 3 Donahue Court.
You're set. You can start speaking.
Great. So I have 3 children in the school system here, one in Mullen, one in the Knock, and one in high school. In an effort to be brief here, I'll just say that I concur with the comments, and the list is at this point long, but Brendan Cooper, Sharif Saeed, Lynn Scow, RJ Doucette, DC Gagnon, Andrea Sargent, and everyone else that's supported returning our children to their education and asked important questions about the plan and the criteria by which we modify the approach that's been described and presented. In particular, I don't agree with the proposed plan for the high school. All the criteria, metrics, and capabilities are at our disposal in the district here and point to our ability to return to at least a hybrid, if not a full in-person instruction. I appreciate it might require some additional work and thinking, but the council, the district, and municipal leaders, I would say, need to have the persistence and creativity to make that happen. My hope is that that's the place we find ourselves. And that there isn't a vote here tonight or in the near future that puts in place the plans that have been proposed.
Thank you, Chris. Joshua?
Yeah, hi, this is Josh Baumfeld from 75 High Street. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and my parents were New York City high school teachers, administrators, and assistants, and assistant principal currently in New York City. I'm a product of the public schools in New York City. So, I'm kind of in the middle as a, physician and sensitive to those of us that have to go back regardless, and also sensitive to teachers that may not want to go back. But ultimately, this is really about the kids, first and foremost. I'm asking that the school committee vote no on any plan that does not include what the state asked for. We need to see a full in-person plan. We need to see a 50% option, hybrid option plan, and we need to see the full remote plan and they need to be moved between easily as the metrics dictate. You can't vote on anything unless you have clear metrics defined as to when you will be using each model. I'm asking for clear guidelines on how are we going to evaluate our teachers and these plans overall, and how often are we going to evaluate these plans. I'm asking for the city council as well later to not approve any budget that doesn't include budgeting for PPE, for air purification. Why are we not asking for additional space for the classes? We know we need more space. There are trailers, repurposed buildings, rental space, or new construction if the building is not going to be adequate. And we need budgeting, at least in our budget, for point-of-care COVID testing as it becomes available. Newburyport has 2 positive cases in the past 14 days, a positivity rate of 0.3%. And while we all wish that there was no risk related to COVID-19, it's impractical and unreasonable. Understanding that this may very well be with us for years or forever, and a vaccine does not guarantee eradication, few vaccines do. At this point in time, there are few, if any, communities in a better position to return to school based on the numbers. If we can't go back now, can we ever go back? And why haven't we defined what it takes to go back? This current published plan that I read through lacks specifics, it's unclear. Remote learning and hybrid plans are unclear. Air filtration is unclear. Use of additional space is unclear. Asynchronous and synchronous teaching is not well defined. Remote academy is vaguely defined. There is no mention of teacher or plan evaluations to see if they're working. We also have not discussed the profound impact of not being in school, the detrimental effect it has on mental health, drug use, suicide, child abuse. And it will be a long time before we truly know the full impact of those things. It will take years. How can we not factor that into the risk equation? Isn't it our moral obligation to do so? The U.S. mortality risk for COVID, especially in our area, is quite small compared to many other things that we deem safe. Riding in a car, swimming in a pool. I don't want to belabor anything, but I think that this virus is not going away, and if it does, something else is lurking in the wings. We need to make the investments now for today and the future. We can't allow for a generation of kids to be lost because we don't have the will to recognize that the risk-benefit equation favors doable mitigation strategies that we know work and in-person school as long as our community remains at a minimum in the white or green zones as defined by Governor Baker. Thanks.
Thank you. Amy. Hello, Amy. Amy, have you unmuted?
Hello.
Hi, Amy.
Good evening.
Can I get your name?
My name is LeBlanc, 18 Woodman Way, Unit 1. I have a master's degree in early childhood education, and I'm a former preschool and toddler teacher. And I now work in another local school district. I have a son in the grade who's been going there since he's turned 3, and he's now 6, going to kindergarten. I am also in support of a full in-school. I am concerned with the following. Cleaning of the toys and equipment with a half-day 3 a.m. and p.m. How are all the toys and the equipment going to get cleaned for the next children? You've got tables, you've got chairs, you've got doorknobs, scissors, pencils. In an hour's time, I don't see, and the teachers getting their breaks, I don't see how that can happen. My son also receives a lot of services in school, and he has some services that they come from outside. And half-day kindergarten, he is not going to receive that. And are those people going to be allowed to come into the school? When will we know those kids that are half-day that do have a lot of services? When are we going to know if they're going to have whole class time? It's going to be a whole different class. If we go remote, also, we need to get curriculum earlier. Curriculum, we're going to get into the day of for pre-K. It was hard to be prepped because I do work for another school district. I was online when he was supposed to be online, and I couldn't prep for his lessons that I needed to prep in time. That's all I have. My husband also has a couple things.
Hello, Charles LeBlanc, also 18 Women Way, Apartment 1. And basically, my concerns about this is the research and the metrics reviews, but they're not cited in the actual final presentation or the paperwork that was sent to all of us by email. That kind of concerns me. And I have one question that the school would ask the superintendent and everybody is basically a 3-foot distance was mentioned. you couldn't handle it for the high school. Well, what about having the high school and middle school be remote, but the Bresnahan, Moreland, go back to school full-time or hybrid? Those scenarios that we never saw in there either. The state asked for those 3 minimum scenarios, but there were other things that the task force could look at, and if they did look at them, they should have mentioned the report as not usable or something. So that's just my biggest concern is, where are the metrics, where is everything else? You keep saying metrics this, metrics that, but it's not cited, and a lot of the things used, the governor and other experts have said, you can do that, like a lot of the other parents and people have said that, so. But I do support teachers. I also think there should be a option for teachers to not teach in person if they feel threatened by COVID or they have family members or whatnot as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, John. Matthew?
Good evening. Listen, I'm going to be really frank here. I put my video on because I think it's important that we see each other here. Tonight, I've heard a lot of excuses, and I've got some questions. So the first question is, how is it that Andover and Lexington and Hingham and other like communities can figure out how to get kids back in school, but you can't? How do we live in a community with a hospital, as you pointed out there, that's apparently now we're hearing is going to help us with testing? Most communities don't have that, but we can't send our kids back to school. And how can you expect a student to sit in front of the screen for 6 hours a day? It's just not reasonable. I also have some questions about the task force. I'm sure that they were all, well-vetted people, and I've met some of them. But a lot of them felt that whatever they had to offer just simply wasn't, listened to. And I'm really interested in how our elected school committee members weren't part of this process and left off the task force. To me, clearly, I'm sorry, but this comes down to leadership, a real lack of leadership. Mayor Holly, we spent a lot of time in
Matthew, I'm going to ask you not, Matthew, I am going to ask you to refrain from identifying individuals.
People are there.
I also wanted to correct a mistake of yours. Every school committee member was assigned to join one of the subcommittees on the task force. So, that's not a fact. And I don't think you should be allowed to sort of sit there and put something that isn't factual out to the community. Would you summarize are you advocating for a full in-person? What are you advocating for?
The city transformed quickly to allow seating where there was once parking. I want to know what have you done to consider use of other spaces in our city or in our high school? Signs went up in the city with instruction where and when we mask. Have similar precautions been taken for our schools? Tonight, clearly through the technology, like in the beginning, it seems that not much has improved. Listen, in opening our town, the governor, Mayor followed a lot of what the governor and the CDC had to say. But when these organizations, along with Jesse, came out and said the communities like Newburyport that have an incredibly low infection rate should be opening schools, that data was ignored. So tonight, I ask that the school committee votes no on the current plan and sends it back to the drawing board. I ask that as much consideration be given to our students and our schools as has been given to restaurants and coffee shops and clothing stores. I think it's at the least you owe us, as 63% of our tax dollars are spent in the school system. So I support everybody in the school who's worked hard, but I'm sick of hearing we worked hard when a lot of other communities have figured out how to do this on day one, and there's no plan laid out right now that allows us to get back to in-person learning. So with that, I apologize for my passion on this, but I'm just sick of it, and I think the whole process is disgusting. So thank you. I'm going to be listening the rest of the night.
Thank you.
I'll shut my video off.
Jodi.
Sorry.
Jodi, can you hear us?
Where's the popcorn? Show them slowly.
There we go.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't get the mute button to show up.
Okay, can we have your address?
First of all, I don't envy anybody in the decision-making process. This is not an easy task. There's no perfect solution, no matter what the option is, and I truly appreciate that. I have worked in the school system as a lunch and recess monitor. My concerns is once the kids are in school, what is the environment going to be like? It's going to be, there's going to be no touching, no hugging, no circles of friends. They're going to have to be spaced walking down the hall. So my first thought was I want them to get back to school to be able to socialize and to be able to learn, but it's not going to be that same environment once they are in the school, because they're not going to be able to hang out in ways that they're used to. At recess, there's going to be no football, no basketball, like it used to be. In my family, I have high-risk people in my home. And I understand people wanting to get their kids back to school, and even if they do remote learning, we're still in school to some degree, and we're in the same boat as everybody else in the country. I think our priority is our kids, and I think we need to look at the risk that we're placing our kids, our teachers, our families, and our community. And I went downtown to pick up some takeout this weekend. And while everybody was wearing masks, I was looking at everybody sitting there eating outside, and they still seemed kind of close to me. And I was thinking about how many of those people are tourists that aren't from our community, and how is that going to affect us in 2 weeks after school works. So I appreciate, personally, the approach to a slow start to see how it goes. As a friend of mine just said to me, I don't want my kids to be the guinea pigs to test and see how this goes. I want to take it slow and make sure my kids, my family, my teachers, and my community are safe.
Okay, Jodi. Jodi, thank you very much. Anthony?
Hello, this is Anthony Dzienak at 201 High Street. As a parent of a first-in-hand child, my wife and I want nothing more than to send them back to school, especially with the hybrid option. But I'm going to tell you why we're leaning towards a remote academy. We got here today where everyone is citing the numbers that we have because we engaged in practices that is not what we're about to jump into. 6 hours in an enclosed room with multiple people, with children who largely go asymptomatic with their symptoms. I don't feel comfortable with the testing that's either been articulated tonight or in the module. To think that we are going to be ahead of this and be able to control it once someone gets infected, because somebody will. If anyone thinks that that will not happen, I think that's ignorant. So for me, we're leaning towards hybrid because I just don't feel comfortable with the status of testing and the reaction of when we do find someone who is positive. More likely than not, when it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. And Hayley?
Hi there, I'm Hayley Knutsen, 7 Month Avenue. Can you hear me?
Yeah, just if you could just get a little closer to the microphone.
So I just want to make a couple of points. So firstly, just as a mum of a kindergarten this last year, just to share my experience with him, remote learning in the spring was not a success for us. I don't blame the school, the teachers, it was an emergency situation. And I know that a lot of thought has been put into making the fall plan much better. My issue is not with the curriculum, it's with the method. Unfortunately, with the remote learning plan, there's no other way around it. It's still just going to be online screen learning, and that will just not work for young children, young elementary students. They're not developmentally able to learn that way. And I've reached out to a number of my friends to see if it was just my experience, and the overwhelming amount have told me that their child would hide under the desk or run away to the bedroom or wouldn't even look at the screen. I don't really understand. I think voting for remote, especially for our youngest children, is really voting for them not to have any education until we find a time to bring them back. Secondly, I listened to the teacher earlier, and I certainly have sympathy for their position. I have sympathy for everybody that has to report into a job and can't stay home in this climate. I've been a member of the Health and Safety Task Force. I listened to Kathy Riccio and Jessica Sue give their expertise and come up with really great ideas on how to minimize the risk and what we need to do to make everybody as safe as possible. And I think they've done a fantastic job of putting that together. I think certainly we can't make it completely risk-free. It never will be, not even with a vaccine, whenever that may come. But to only focus on the risks of reopening ignores looking at the risks of not reopening. I just read an article recently from a doctor in Massachusetts, in a hospital in Boston, saying that they've seen rates of eating disorders rise with children. That they have young children coming with suicidal thoughts, adolescents who have acted on their impulses and then succeeded. To not open when missing the opportunity for high-need students, to lose their window for intervention, which will affect their life outcomes. We'll have lost learning for kids who can't learn remotely. We're missing child abuse and all sorts of things that even do happen with the Newburyport, though we don't want to imagine they do. So I think we need to balance everything, the risks of reopening and the risks of not reopening. And to that point, I know Jessica and Jessica Sue, I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot here. You have been asked about the high school plan, and a lot of the focus here has been on the high school plan. But as an expert, and as somebody who has faith in the experts and the science and the data, I would like to ask you what your expert opinion is on returning our elementary and middle school students to their classrooms in a hybrid model first, and whether that would be the safe thing to do on the balance of risks.
Hayley, thank you very much. And Palmer?
Hi, my name is Matt Palmer. I'm at 142 State Street. We are parents of having 2 kids who have gone through the high school, graduated, and we have 2 that are going to be senior and becoming freshmen. All right, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we're getting some very interesting feedback there. Go ahead.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, it's better.
All right, so I wanted to first thank everyone for all the hard work, and this is obviously a very challenging time for everyone, but I do want to voice my strong opinion in support of getting our kids back into school as quickly as possible. For high school kids, I think it's critical that they are in-person learning. We've seen tonight some of the challenges that remote learning can present with the unfortunate incidents that we experienced with Zoom. We need the kids back in school. What I would like to see from the committee is clear timelines on when you're going to review the plan again and what are those key metrics for us to get our kids back in school. That should be the overall goal. That was mentioned by the superintendent, but to get to there, I believe we need to see clear, definitive goals and timelines and when that can happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Danielle?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Danielle, we can hear you. If you could just give us your address, that would be great.
Perfect. I'm at 23 Windward Drive. I have 2 daughters, one at the Brez and one at the Mullen. You said earlier a key term, dynamic. This pandemic is certainly something that is going to put us in a situation to have to adapt and be dynamic. My biggest concern is not whether we're going to be hybrid or whether we're going to be back full time or whether we're going to be fully remote, but what are we going to do to support the parents who inevitably will have to fill in the gaps where the educators will not be able to participate. In the spring, we found ourselves quickly creating our own Windward Academy here, educating our kids, supporting the teachers certainly, but doing much more than just getting them online.
Thank you. I assume we finished? Danielle?
Yes, sir.
I guess so. Seeing no others, I will close. Oh, we've got one more. Amber.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, Amber, if you could just give us your address.
Sure. So I'm at 9 Barton Street in Newburyport, and I just wanted to pop on and say I'm actually a nurse practitioner locally, and I also have 3 children, 2 of which will be starting at the Bresnahan, and 1 will be going into the middle school this fall. And I just wanted to come on and say that I really thank everybody for the hard work that they've put into this, the time and the hard work, and just to echo much of what's already been said earlier today. But I just wanted to say that as a nurse practitioner and in the healthcare community, I really support the plan that's been put forward. And I think that clearly a lot of time and effort has been put into it. And I think that one of the key factors going forward will be flexibility on the part of everybody, really, and that going slow is going to be key in order to make everything successful and safe. So I think that that's really it. But thank you so much for all of your time and effort on this, and I fully support what's been put forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bob.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Bob LeBlanc. I live at 15 Kent Street. I have a son in the Bres. I have a daughter at the Knock. My wife works at the high school. But full remote is the only real option. Look at what happened in Israel. Look at what recently happened in UNC Chapel Hill. Look at the rising rates in the South. Look at the recent warning from infectious disease experts on the dangers and catastrophe that could happen with the hybrid approach. Look at the fact that 3 feet is not adequate or even based on science. It's politically based, not scientifically based. Look at our past failures trying to contain something as simple as a headlights outbreak. And COVID is far more infectious than headlights. The data is clear. All right, opening schools for anything other than full remote will lead to the illness and death of children and faculty. All right, we have the technology, we have the talent, we could even be using this as an opportunity to push a remote learning platform for the future to even cover things as simple as snow days, right? So, full remote is the only way to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Audrey.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Can we just get
I
your...
would just like to speak once again from a student perspective. I'm from 5 Mile Drive. And I would just like to share my unique experience with the remote learning. And I just really do not think it is the correct option. If we were meant to do remote learning, we would be doing that from day one, but we are not meant to be learning remote. I think hybrid or full back to school is the only option because, like for example, once again, 504s and people who have needs can't learn properly without being in class with their peers. Me, for example, I am a social person who really needs social back and forth speaking and in-class learning to get a proper education. We also need to focus on the future here. It's not just what is supposed to be now. We have to look forward and realize that this is going to affect all of us in this generation. And someone else commented earlier on how I don't want my child to be the guinea pig. But I think that is honestly almost kind of selfish because somebody has to do it. And if a lot of us want to go back to school, we are willing to take that chance, and I think you need to let us take that chance. Because if we just keep waiting, then this is just going to get worse. And we're going to be a whole generation that did not learn properly and didn't figure out how we're supposed to do it. So if we try and we all band together here and try to figure out how we can go back to school hybrid or full-time, I think that we can really make a better future for ourselves overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. Katie Cardi.
Hi, Katie Cardi. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I live at 41A Merrimack Street. I am parent to an incoming kindergartner. I have been really closely following all of this as a member of the task force and spent a lot of time over the last few months working on this, and I appreciate everyone else's work, all the administrators, the school committee, and all the parents that have volunteered a lot of time. I will try and keep this short and not repeat anything that everyone has already said, but I am in full support of a hybrid plan at the minimum, and definitely just finding metrics for us to move forward as a community. I think it's really important that we focus on the data here. We look at where we are, as Governor Baker has already outlined. Newburyport is in a great situation, and I don't think anyone that is in support of hybrid is saying, you know, let's rush back into things, but I think I can speak for a lot of folks is that we do need to move forward, because the unfortunate reality of this is we have no idea when there is going to be a vaccine. We can hope that it's going to be sooner than later, but the reality is that it's probably not going to be given to teachers, and it's not going to be just given to anyone. It's going to be given to those in very high needs. So we don't know when that could be. That could be 3 years from now, and I think it's very important that while we are in this situation with the data, in our favor is that we get our students back in to create some sort of relationship. It's going to be very impossible for our younger students and for our high school students to create any sort of relationship with a teacher. We've never met them. If we vote tonight on a full remote plan, that's what we're setting up our students for. I think at the very least, we need to work on a hybrid plan, get the kids back into school while we can right now, and then go from there. And I think it's incredibly important that the school committee develops set metrics to how we would scale items back when this plan is going to be reevaluated. We cannot just be going based off of suggestions or at some point we're going to reevaluate it. It really needs to be defined, and it's important that it should be defined tonight. The community has done a great job supporting restaurants, local businesses, getting them up and running. And it is frustrating as a parent and taxpayer to see that I don't feel as much focus has been placed on the children, and that this has just been more of a coming to light thing in the last few weeks. These questions should have all been addressed at the start of this pandemic and as things developed at the beginning of the summer. I know that people have been working very hard behind the scenes, but like many other parents have said, we can look to other communities that are doing this and that have had plans in place and that are thinking outside the box. Other towns like Newton brought in 32 tents.
Katie, can I ask you to sum up?
Yes, I can summarize. So in summary, in support for a hybrid plan, and I think that we should work more creatively on how we can get the kids to an in-person education.
Thank you very much. My notes are that Danielle has already spoken. Under a different name. I don't know. Just put iPhone 8.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So, hi, I'm John Catino. I live at 8 Marlborough Street. And I'm just going to put my support behind Councilor Z and similar speakers. But I just hope that the school committee and everybody involved please review the actual data that involve COVID in Massachusetts. I get a little bit, I don't want to sound insensitive, but I get a little bit impatient when people start talking about COVID, like there was a speaker a couple of minutes ago, I think it might have been Mr. LeBlanc or something, saying people are going to be dying left and right. And I really urge the council and school committee to look at the data, not just for how many people get the virus, but how many people get sick, seriously sick, and how many people actually die from the virus. It's a minuscule number. So I keep getting this, I see a lot of tension in people's wording about, what's going to happen if somebody gets infected. It's a flu, and death rate is minuscule. And I think we have to be cognizant of that when we're talking about this. That's the only thing I would add. Last thing is, this isn't about the teachers. This is about the kids. If teachers are vulnerable or they have the pre-existing conditions and they can show that, then they should have a way to opt out. And we should get a long-term substitute in there. But we shouldn't shut down the schools because of this. If all the other schools can do it, we can do it too. I think we have to work hard. That's it for me. I appreciate you listening.
Thank you very much, John. Danielle has already spoken. We didn't let Charlie Tantar speak twice. I assume we're not going to do that. Yes. I am going to close public comment.
Bruce, I'd like to speak.
John Sheehan.
I'm Joan Sheehan. I'm a third grade teacher. I'm a Newburyport resident, and I'm the president of the Newburyport Teachers Association. I want to start by saying thank you to the teachers who in this district and all the staff who has been working since March 13th, nonstop. We dealt with quite a situation in the spring. I think you said it best, Sean. We were building the plane as we were flying it. I think we did a fantastic job. And when I hear people refer to the disaster that it was, I'm very disappointed. We are a very professional group of people. We have worked hard from day one, and we will continue to do so. I have a letter that I want to read. It's very brief. I wrote it last week and sent it to the school committee members. I've worked throughout the summer with Superintendent Gallagher to find the best possible model to reopen schools in the fall. The task force, school committees, families, and staff have all been grappling with what's best for our students as we move forward during this unprecedented time. I know that the superintendent and all the administrators have put in countless hours, thank you very much, working to find the best solution for our students, staff, and community. I believe we are very fortunate to have Dr. Jessica Sue and other experts on our task force. She recently gave a compelling presentation on COVID and our community to multiple groups, and I'm grateful for her knowledge in the field of epidemiology and how fortunate we are to have her and others here in Newburyport sharing their skilled expertise with so many. On August 5th, 2020, a survey was sent out to the NTA to ask which model was preferred, the hybrid or the remote, knowing that the all-in model had already been taken off the table. Please be aware, 68.8% of the staff voted at that time for a remote return, and 31.2% voted for the hybrid model. Now that more details are emerging for both models, there continues to be more questions. Although Dr. Sue's presentation was captivating, the hybrid model is incomplete as we still don't have we don't know what specific actions will be taken if someone tests positive in a cohort or building. Additionally, the trigger forcing us to go remote has not been identified. This important information needs to be determined and shared with the school committee, family, staff, and the community at large. And I'll end with this statement. In the event that Newburyport adopts a remote model or is forced to return to a fully remote model from a hybrid model, the NTA reserves the right to be an active participant in discussions on the location of staff and the format of instruction delivery to students. I had two other points that were already addressed, one being the rapid testing of the staff, which I appreciate, and the other one was the air quality. And I know on page 14 in the plan, there were some specifics, and I wondered if we were gonna maybe get a few more specifics on the air quality. Thank you.
you. Sean? I will now close public comment. The next item on the agenda are school committee questions, comments, and deliberations. I would ask, I would suggest, Sean, that this is probably a time when the school committee members have questions that have been generated, that we ask your staff those questions.
Yes.
Mr. Callahan?
This is a pretty easy one. I think there's a lot of confusion about the remote academy. We got around 100 some odd emails, and a lot of them asked about this, but a particular parent called me saying that they may be doing remote because of their family situation, and she's wondering why that child, say they're in cohort Monday, Tuesday at the Brez, why can't they just stay home and go into the school the same way that the Thursday, Friday kids are doing it, and if she doesn't want to be forced to use the remote academy. And the second part of remote academy is, why is the time frame to choose Wednesday when no parents actually have any idea what's going on about it in details, and they were told in the letter from the President hand they have to choose by Wednesday if their kid's going to go. I have a whole lot more questions about the high school plan, but I saw that Ms. Reardon's up, so you can go.
Right. Well, do you want to answer them first?
Yeah. Well, can you answer, or do you want to wait for anybody else to see if they've got any questions?
No, we can actually, our Assistant Superintendent Beck can come up to the mic too, and we can talk about the remote academy. For us, what I think our game plan is for our plan tonight, once we have a direction, then we're going to reach out to those families and really talk about, or maybe even set up a Zoom with people that are actually thinking about the remote academy to answer very specific questions.
But how does that work if they've been asked to decide by Wednesday?
I think we're looking to get numbers on how many students are considering the remote academy.
Okay, so
could it be a soft commit? Not
right. Yeah, it can be a soft commit. We just want to reach out to the families to see, who's truly interested in not coming back.
Sean, maybe the way to do that would be to set up a Zoom meeting and publicize it in the district, and anybody who's interested can attend.
Yeah, let's Assistant Superintendent Beck, why don't you talk about that? And then
just one quick question. Will the people who want to not necessarily be able to not choose remote academy, but just be in their cohort, but still remoting in, however that is going to happen for non-academy kids? Or are they going to be forced to do academy?
What's challenging about that at this point is that working in a hybrid model, right now the remote academy is built for students K to 8 because the high school at this time is doing synchronous streaming live for their classes all the time. So we haven't included high school students in the remote academy because the high school students can access I'm sorry to interrupt you, Angela, but this is very specific to a kid in 3rd grade. I know.
But if the cohort for Monday, Tuesday is in the building, and the cohort for Thursday, Friday is not in the building, yet they're saying the same things, why does the kid have to join a separate thing at that grade level instead of just, I'm Monday, Tuesday, but I'm still going to be remote like the Thursday, Friday kids still are?
Because what's happening at the elementary level and the middle school, well, the middle school is a little bit different, but at the elementary level, what's happening is not going to be identical to what's happening during the day. It's going to be an equitable kind of learning experience. And you have to remember that you've got classroom teachers who are managing both. And so they're managing the half of the class that is learning remotely, and they're developing lessons, and we're developing support systems to support those children that are in the cohort that's learning remotely, as well as they're managing and building lessons for the students who are in the class. It's a lot. It's a lot for them to juggle. Students who are fully remote, who are never going to come in the in-person, are going to miss those in-person experiences that they're going to build from for some of the remote learning. So it would be really challenging, I think, for the classroom teacher. That would then create 3 scenarios that they need to be planning for all the time. And so that's why we're for families who are choosing full remote, we're working within the academy.
So to clarify, the elementary grades are not streaming when they're at home?
Not full-time.
And I also thought I heard that the middle school and the Mullen might also, they're trying to parallel the schedule so that the students can engage whether they're home or in school.
The students can engage, but it's not going to be a full streaming model the way the high school is. That's where the difference is. So they're not going to be watching their teacher live all day long. There will be times at the elementary level that they're checking in with the students in the morning, in the afternoon. There may be an introduction to lessons, like a launch of a lesson, and then the students may do some asynchronous work or some independent work associated with that.
So are students going to have a different teacher when they're remote?
They may.
So a third grade teacher is going to teach some kids live and then teach those kids again when they're remote, or no?
No. So,
okay, I just want to clarify this. So the elementary teachers may have more than one teacher this year?
No, they're going to have one teacher, but they may have support staff that also supports them during the remote learning. Because you have to remember that while the students who are learning remotely at home are having their lessons, the teacher is also teaching a group live in the classroom. So that's why we're talking about a model where the teacher launches the lesson with all of the students, whether they're home or whether they're in school. During that morning meeting, the teacher can set the stage for the learning that's happening, whether you're in school or whether you're at home. And then the students may be supported by other teachers during that time if you're remote, before there's another check-in with their classroom teacher who is working with the students who are in school live. So it will be, they'll have contact every day with their classroom teacher. They're going to have face-to-face contact with their classroom teacher every day. But the classroom teacher is not streaming live and trying to teach 2 separate groups, because elementary students have a very different attention span for that kind of work too. You have to develop instructional strategies that are appropriate to the developmental level of the students.
Right, and I think that goes back to the feedback we got from elementary parents, and we heard it, I think, in the public comment, that trying to have the younger students live streaming throughout the entire morning. So that's why working with the teachers, once we move forward, you have the morning meeting, they set the stage, and then you have asynchronous work where, if it's on ELA or if it's on math, with staff support. So we're going to be utilizing some of our staff support, IAs to be checking in for the students that are at home in the hybrid model.
I'm just going to leave this last thing. What if the family says, no, I'm not doing remote academy. I want to do it just like I explained, because they want their kid to be still part of that community of Newburyport Public Schools, not this kind of not quite Newburyport Public Schools.
Well, I think for us, it's taking our teachers, right? Our teachers that are going to be working in the remote academy and really giving that specialized attention to those students.
I understand. What do you do if the parent says, no, I'm not doing that, but I'm not going to put my kid in the building?
Well, I think we're going to have to talk to those parents.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's why originally we need to know how many students are we talking about.
I just want to point out, I think the confusion has to do with the word asynchronous.
Hey, Dave, I'm sorry. Sheila was trying to say
something.
I just had a comment about, or a question about the remote academy. Are the students going to be put together by grade level? What will that look like? Will they have their own classroom, and will they have social opportunities within the
and I think that for us, it depends on the number. So if we're talking 50 families, if we're talking 12 families, So I think that, you go back to planning in this uncertain time, that's a big piece of the uncertainty.
Okay.
Getting an understanding of how many students are we talking about, because our response with the remote academy may look different if it's 10 students versus 50 students.
I was just going to say, I think the problem, and the confusion here is with the word asynchronous, because I think some people think that just means we're not connected with the school that day.
No.
We're at home, we have assignments, but what this really means is the kids are checking in every hour, but then they're given some independent work to do. So I think independent work and asynchronous learning are very different. To me, asynchronous learning means that when the parent's done with their work day, the kids can sleep late and hang out and do whatever, and then later in the day, they can get on and do some work. That's asynchronous. What's being described here is just a half an hour of independent time.
Yeah, that's not.
So I think that's some of the confusion as to why people think that they can log in and do the same thing. One more question on this, sorry, Sean, is that at the high school, if we go forward as proposed tonight, but we're talking about in 2 or 3 weeks reevaluating, all of a sudden we will need a remote academy plan. But yet you're setting up the remote academy to be in trimesters, which is different than the high school. And I think the high school obviously will need a much wider range of options. So have we thought about that? Like if we're really thinking about maybe going to a hybrid thing in 2 or 3 weeks, what does the remote academy look like? And since people will probably say in 2 or 3 weeks, I'm not going to the school, I want to start the remote academy from day one. I wonder why we're not doing that.
We've had a lot of discussion about that. I'm glad that you brought that up, David. Is because even as the hybrid model moves forward at the high school, there will be synchronous learning will continue to happen. So some students will come into school, but the lesson will still be streamed for those who aren't. So the opportunity to continue in that learning environment with your peers on your own high school schedule, you just would not be one of the people that ever come in. But the opportunity for you to get that live lesson streamed is still going to be available to you, even in the hybrid model.
Right, and our principals can really talk really specifics, because they've been working with the teacher leaders on what that's going to kind of look like. I think really at every grade level.
Sorry, Sean. It's okay. I just want to have Angela clarify. You started out speaking and you mentioned K-8 for the remote learning academy. It's grades 1 through 8, right? Or that's what you said when you were up front.
No, kindergarten. And I said kindergarten would have a shorter window. It would be a shorter day. We would offer it for kindergarten through grade 8.
I misunderstood that. Okay.
Yeah.
So are we committing to having some sort of Zoom or public forum for people about the remote academy tomorrow?
Parents, yeah, for the families that are interested in the remote academy.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
We're just trying, I think that deadline was just to let us know like how many families we're really talking about. So that's why we felt after the presentation tonight, if people didn't see that hybrid model, kind of the talk that's been going on, then we could say, who's interested in just a full remote model is not going to be coming back in person.
That's going to be important for us too, for dedicating the right staff. Once we have a better idea of who the students are, then we'll know what kind of staffing that we're going to need for the academy too.
Can I suggest that you actually set that up as soon as possible? Like set it up tomorrow for whatever day you're going to do it, and then get that out to the entire district with the notation that Wednesday is whatever. I think they should make the decision after you've had the Zoom meeting and not before. So that, if you can get a Zoom meeting together for Thursday, then they can continue to have conversations on Friday. I think you should just set it up and get it out to the community soon.
Right. I mean,
People are feeling pressure, and they don't have enough information to make decisions.
Sure.
So set it up and have that conversation with the community, and you might get a better read on what you're going to need to do.
Right, and I think that's what that Wednesday, let us know Wednesday so we can start figuring out how many families are going to be involved in that.
Principal Wolf, I was hoping you could address for us, I think, the biggest issues with the whole Newburyport reopening plan is the high school.
Yep.
I think that's pretty clear from public comment. I think that's clear from the dozens and dozens and dozens of emails that we've all received. And, you know, I always viewed the reopening plan, and maybe it's because of the conversations that I've had directly with the superintendent, as a very fluid, very short-term process, particularly for the high school, as we begin to move forward. I've heard dates like October 5th, October 12th, and I think one of the things that would help us in terms of making decisions is you could talk to us a little bit about what you envision as the next step, and how soon you believe that could happen in terms of metrics.
Yep, definitely. And so kind of what I had shared when I was up at the podium, so with our cohorting structure, using the large spaces on the first floor, so the idea is that students then come for so a grade level is able to come for 2 full days. And that allows teachers, so still using the cohorting process, so that you're better able to, should somebody let us know that they've contracted the virus, you're better able to know where they were in the building and who they were with. But it does allow teachers to then coordinate how students access the in-person lessons. So whether it's using outside spaces for a full class, or if it's an elective that's a mixed grade level, so it means the numbers would be small for students to go and participate in the elective class, like an art class or photography. So that would be the next move, where you're increasing access to the building. And so how the schedule is designed is a grade level, so with the 4 grades, so over a 2-week period, each grade level would have been in for a clipper block at the onset or for the advisory period. And that allows us to really do a lot of things in terms of laying a foundation for the students. We have the new software that I spoke about that we want to acclimate students to in terms of making appointments to see teachers for the extra help. It allows us to also establish some of the community building things that we started last school year. We heard tonight just in regards just to the work that we need to continue to do around race, culture, and diversity. But then by increasing students by grade level to come in for 2 days in a row, now you're starting to work in-person instruction opportunities. And so then the question would be, is what's the next level of increasing in-person instruction for students, and which I think we heard a lot of tonight is, I think, the biggest concern from the community.
So what happens to labs, for example?
Yeah, so with the process that I just explained about a full grade level coming in, so now if I'm a science teacher, so our labs are being outfitted with plexiglass, so you can actually have more, so some of our classrooms, because of the 6-foot distancing, has made it difficult in terms of, even by going with a 50-50 hybrid, we have many classes that just don't fit their spaces. But in the labs, through the work of Steve, they're being outfitted with plexiglass, so a lab teacher can safely bring the students upstairs in a very organized, controlled way for students to participate in the lab when they come in.
About that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I just wanted to clarify that starting off having the clipper blocks every other week, that's to make room for moving to having those 2-day cohorts.
Yeah, so our schedule, it goes,
yeah.
So there's 4 blocks of time, 4 periods every day. So we have A, B, C, D, and then we have E, F, G, and then we have our clipper period. And so 4 days of the week, so Monday, Tuesday would be, so Monday A, B, C, D, Tuesday E, F, G, clipper block, Wednesday is A, B, C, D, Thursday is E, F, G, clipper block. And then Friday we have small, shorter classes that, but every single period is meeting for teachers to really wrap up what happened during the week and project forward for the following week. So there's 2 clipper periods that convene during the week. So for us to do the in-person, only 1 grade level is able to come in with using spaces on the first floor of the high school. And you know, and I get it from the community, it's only once every other week initially. And ideally I would, with obviously guidance from the school committee, like I feel confident that by just doing the 2-week structure to then being able to bring in students for 2 full days as a grade level, and for teachers to be able to coordinate how they are meeting with the students. But also part of this, you know, part of the thinking is also to, like what Angela was just talking about, as teachers are becoming more acclimated in terms of how they're managing and having students interact with each other using the remote lessons, it's going to set them up to, as we increase the hybrid model, bring the students in who are at home. And again, like I said, and I can't emphasize this enough, you know, if a student, if it's their day to come in, but they know that they need to do their due diligence because they're not feeling well, so they need to stay at home. It's one less structure because they know they can just log into the class and participate, if they're up to it, that is. So in my mind, as we were challenged in terms of thinking differently about how we bring students back, it just started to click more that this is a methodical approach, so that in a year that can be very volatile, because the thing is, from my understanding from listening in terms of how things work, even in a hybrid model at a high school, is you're going to be more susceptible to being in position that you're going to need to close down your building for chunks of time. And so to me, now at this point, it makes sense is let's get everybody good to go on engaging in the routines and structures of remote learning, build teacher confidence in managing that time and helping students to navigate that, but very importantly, interacting with it, and students getting to it. But yes, trying to, if it's even every 2 weeks, trying to ramp up student access to the building, I do think is very important. But I do want to say that I feel like, you know, having a team approach on making those decisions is very, very important. And how students are also being increased to the building. Right now, the logical approach is if we're starting with the clipper period, that's a logical step where you can bring in a grade level for 2 full days. So they're there from 8:15 till 2:40, and then each period, teachers are coordinating how they're going to engage in in-person instruction. But then even with the lunch block, there's 200 students in the building, but they're situated in different parts of the first floor, so everybody's pretty much socially distanced. So we can engage in lunch in a safe way with students spread out in the first floor areas.
Mr. Buckhiser?
I guess a couple questions. My first one's the obvious one is, if you have all of this at least partially put together, I don't understand why this is the first time we're hearing about it. Like having this as part of the plan, saying that this is first and then we're coming to the next, would have saved a lot of email reading and a lot of public comment and a lot of anxiety over the past couple weeks. I also got to ask, if you think in 2 weeks, which would be, so I'm just looking at the calendar, the seniors would get to have a clipper block on September 29th.
I think he's talking 2 weeks from opening, right? So that'd be
Well, I would look at it as 2.5 weeks. You're looking at
So it's every Tuesday, Thursday.
Yeah.
Right, so 17th, 22nd, 24th, and 29th would have the seniors clipper block. So you're saying that after those 2 weeks, we could start bringing kids into the building if conditions don't change?
If that's the way that the school committee wanted to go, then we would make that happen. If we feel that it's better to cycle for
But
If
what I'm
it's better to cycle for 4 weeks, then we would wait for the 4 weeks.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, if we're saying the building isn't a place where we can adhere to safety regulations, then we're saying that September 16th or October 1st or November 5th. Right? The metrics are not going to get lower than we have now. So the building is either safe or the building's not safe. The building's not going to get safe. So I don't have I sent you an email that has a plan very much like this, where each grade level comes in for 2 days and you rotate whatever and whatnot. But if we don't have the rooms to separate them, like we heard earlier, they're not going to appear. And if we already have them, then I don't know why we're not considering starting off in that hybrid plan with the kids coming in each grade level 2 days in a rotation. So I'm trying to figure, like, something's not working, right?
Well, I think you got to look at it as the plan that we're proposing is a very different model from a regular hybrid where students are walking throughout the building. It's a lot more controlled.
I get that, you know, and I get, but what we've been hearing is that we're not starting in the same type of a hybrid as the other buildings because of the building.
Schedule. It's the number of kids.
But if we're going to work this out on October 1st, then clearly we can work it out for September 16th.
Well, I think...
I'm just trying to figure out what the roadblocks are, so we know what needs to be addressed in future conversations. If the roadblocks, if it's the school, like, I have a hard time believing, and I don't have the room count, I don't work there and whatever, but if we were to bring in the freshman class, 180 kids, that we couldn't distance them throughout the school if they were the only ones there. And now you're saying that potentially after 1 or 2 rounds of clipper block only weeks, that we could do that.
It's the idea is to expand the clipper block and not necessarily, so if you're talking...
But he's saying 2 full days per grade level, so that's not an expansion of the clipper block, that's a full day of school, 2 days in a row.
And teachers coordinating how they access, because it's very different in terms of, so I'm an English teacher, so let's say the seniors are in, it's A period, right? And I have an A period senior English class. Now I have options. I know my room capacity is 10 students. I have 22 students in my class. It's a nice day. I can take my full class outside. Or maybe I'm coordinating for a part of the students to come up for a part of the period, because that's also the rationale for the 80-minute blocks, because it gives flexibility in the amount of time, while students downstairs are working on another piece. And then the second half of the class comes in. It gives a little bit more control in terms of how students are accessing the teacher.
I guess I don't understand 2 things. Number one is, part of me envisions that if you have 20 kids in a class and you can only fit 10 in the room, can't we just borrow an 11th grade English teacher? Right? And then we have 2 teachers for 1 class and we can teach. Like, when I said spread the freshmen out, I mean, I think when people asked us to think creatively about reopening, they were doing just that, which might mean that an 11th grade English teacher helps teach that 12th grade English class in a different room.
Won't they be teaching, Dave? They'll be teaching.
So if the other grades are remote, you can separate them, you can shift the kids around so that they all have an 11th grade teacher, for example, could teach all the kids who are taking 11th grade CP English. I don't need 4 teachers to do that on a remote day. And, I'm going to also say something that's kind of out of sync with whatever we've heard this year. I don't think let me rephrase this. I'm really worried about the amount of time we're talking about kids sitting and kids sitting in front of computers, whether that's in school or at home. And I'm a huge fan of, maybe not the entire semester being asynchronous, but I'm a big fan of some of those days, especially at the high school where kids can work independently. And we have a standards-based curriculum going on where the kids should be given time to work independently and then come back to a program day. So I think there's ways to manipulate the schedule to get kids together. And if we're not going to accept that, that's fine. I'm still thinking that, though, that Mr. Wolf has a plan where the grade level can come in, but he's saying we don't want to do it until October. And I think clearly the community wants us now. And since the health metrics aren't going to change and the building isn't going to change, why are we waiting? Especially since we've already had...
Behavior of the students.
What's that?
Behavior of the students.
So the more mature students in 12th grade have to have a 3-week waiting period at home to learn how to be remote, but a kid in 6th grade is going to be able to figure out on day 1?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Mr. Wolf. I just want to hear, we have, for this one school, with whatever the issues are of, getting kids around the building, like Dave keeps saying, will not change between September 16th and October whatever. So why not just not have that kind of odd 3-week remote only thing? And at one point you said you're getting the kids ready to figure out how to be remote. I mean, those are the kids that are, all the students are going to know. I mean, my kid's been remote since March, right? So and it's not just me. I'm sure it's all the hundreds of people that email us who don't get it. What is the 3-week lead up for?
And I guess the other question is...
May I please say something?
Sure.
I just would like to just add this one point. My husband's an orthodontist, and it has been an amazing, it just totally, completely transformed the way he works with his patients, how many he can see, the different cleaning practices, but most importantly, after being home and trying to bring his staff back to come to work. And the only way he got them back was to start very slow.
So we're saying it's staff.
I'm saying part of this is.
That's the answer.
I'm speaking for myself here, I am, but I have to, please, sir.
Stand in front of the mic, please.
I'm just mentioning that this is a whole community. It's not only the students, it's the teachers coming back too.
Yes.
So that we can start to build.
Grade down to kindergarten who are starting on September 16th. Well, I'm reclaiming my time, I'm sorry.
And so we have.
I respect everything you're saying, but there are other grades.
She was in the middle of a sentence. Just let her finish her sentence.
Go ahead, thank you.
So you also have different developmental levels of the students. And so so the older the kids, the one reason that we also want to, go slowly but work together with the students, there's a reason you take different desks out of a classroom so that the classroom looks different to the students and they understand the importance of respecting physical distancing between each other.
So we're saying that 12th graders and
Mr. Hockhauser, please.
Okay.
So all I'm asking is that you can understand that we're trying to build a system for success. And they don't know, but I sat here and I watched my husband slowly start to bring his staff back. Started out 2 hours, then he made it up to 4. He brought it back. So it's while it's different, it's some of the same approach of getting everybody back together. We've been working in the schools, but there are a lot that haven't been. So that's one comment I wanted to make.
Again, we're saying that 10th graders and 12th graders, students and teachers, can't do the things that we're asking 4th grade teachers to do because they're coming back in a hybrid from day 1. So I understand the idea of easing people in. And when I spoke to Sean a couple weeks ago, when some of this was starting to bubble over, I said, let's pick an idea and run with it. And I think the problem everyone's having here is that We're not running with it. That we don't have, like, I get the idea of easing things in, but we're only asking that of one school. Everybody else is jumping on board. Right, the kindergartners are going to start from their first day with the kindergarten program, but the juniors need to be eased back into the school. So I think, and we can go back and forth on whether that's appropriate or not, but I know that's what people are struggling with.
No, I've spoken to a lot of people, yeah.
I just want to add, we're able to cohort students. Pre-K right through grade 8. That's a big difference, though. We're not able to cohort them.
So I'm going to ask again, in 2 weeks after we start, Andy's saying we have a plan that could bring the kids in. So
In a cohorted way, though, not roaming around the building.
It's going to change in the last 2 weeks of September. If we can do it in October, we can do it September 16th. Or we can't.
The difference, here's the major difference. And this is you can call every high school. The major difference is when you're scheduling kindergarten up to 8th grade, you can put students in the class. So they have math, they have science, they have that. When you get to the high school level, right, your schedule is based on student selection. It's not based on content, it's based on student selection. So your staffing patterns, the schedule, so when we're looking at, because we're not health professionals, so when we were very excited to the point where at the elementary level, we can cohort a class and we can cohort a teacher. So we look at 3 things. Is everything that we've learned. Number 1, can you cohort the kids? In those instances, I can cohort a kid and I can cohort the teachers and I know where they've been. Can you contact trace? In all those scenarios, we can contact trace, so if there was a potential exposure. The other piece that was really valuable is can you isolate a potential exposure? So that means in all of those different scenarios, up to grade 8, we can do those 3 things. When you're looking at a high school schedule, so you have, not only do you have the content areas, but within the content areas, you have different levels. You have honors, sometimes AP. So all of those students, if I had a English 11 class, A block, and there's, let's say, 20 students in that class, those 20 students then leave. Some are going to have art, some will have history, some will have biology, chemistry. So if you had when you say, can you cohort that class, can you cohort that scenario, you can't cohort that scenario because those students are then, even if you had 100, they're going to contact trace. You can't contact trace and isolate that. So the idea of what Andy started off with is our emphasis for all schools was to have some sort of in-person connection. You can cohort the advisory because you can put 10 kids with every teacher. So the idea with that is they live stream like everyone's saying, but instead of disrupting a high school schedule, like those seniors and that are preparing for college, some are on AP track, we have art students, we have all those individual students. So if the idea is, well, let's just bring them in, and like you said, we'll have all the English teachers do the in-person, we'll have one English teacher teach the other 150 or 60 kids online, you start to then compromise their academics. And that's the challenge. So the idea is, why didn't we know this? I'm just trying to explain. The idea was why...
He's not answering my question. I'm sorry.
I'm just, you can...
But we're off on a tangent here.
Right. All I'm saying is, when you say, the idea is, why didn't you know this 3 weeks ago? Because we didn't know this 3 weeks ago. So then what we said is, could we expand this advisory to contact trace, but then bring students into the classrooms in the building? And so this is kind of the thought process that's happening now.
Oh, so again, In 2 weeks, and I'm using Andy's language, in 2 weeks, Mr. Wolf, will you be able, do you think you have a version of bringing the kids back with maintaining the schedule's integrity?
With the structure of using the clipper period, it sets us up to be able to do that. Well, because they're organized in cohorts right from the get-go.
Okay, so what is keeping us from doing that 2 weeks earlier? Mr. Gallagher just told us all about the cohorting, which we understand, and the difference of the high school schedule, which I fully understand. You're saying it's possible to do in October. And I'm trying to figure out why that's not possible to do in September. Because the reasons he's giving and the reasons people are giving for it not being possible to do shouldn't exist in October. They shouldn't go away. Right? The schedule's not going to change. The kids are still going to be taking AP or CP or all these other classes. They're going to be doing that in October or September, unless we're blowing up the schedule. That's a totally different conversation. I'm trying to figure out...
We're not blowing up the schedule.
Okay, so then I'm trying to figure out what's different in September than October. That's my question, and I don't know.
It's getting into routines. I think that's an important part, Dave.
Okay, so
I think that's I think it is so... Part of my presentation was about key considerations, right? And key considerations was trying to minimize disruption to teaching and learning, but also recognizing the importance of, all right, steadily increasing student access, in-person access to their teachers in a way that is manageable and, from what we've learned across the summer, in a way that doesn't compromise the high school needing to shut down. So then that's the goal, is to be able to keep it, hopefully stay afloat across many months.
And I've heard you say that too, but then as a district, why is the high school the only place that needs to be eased in?
The building, I feel like we've talked about this, and Dr. Sue's recommendations.
All over the place.
Okay, so let me ask you the easier question. Clearly I'm not going to get an answer here. If we vote to say that we want to start straight off on the 16th,
Say that.
a couple kids or a couple staff find it squirrely for a few days.
I feel a lot more confident going 2 weeks with the plan that we have and then getting to that point. I mean, almost for like what we heard in the public comment, you measure twice and cut once, is trying to do this in a way that's methodical and builds everybody's confidence, but again, sets up routines and structures for students with the remote learning. Just recognizing that as if we continue to increase student access in the building, and if we go to a maybe further down the road, a different type of hybrid model where there is more student movement across the building, but we have to recognize as a school community that if we are to do that, there's greater chance the high school will not be able to isolate a case, and if somebody had contracted the virus, we'd have to close down for a period of time. That's the sacrifice we're trying to navigate. I mean, yeah.
Quite a while, Mr. Reardon. Yeah, I just haven't had a chance to talk, so again, I appreciate
I get it.
In this room. I bleed crimson and gold. Okay, I think everyone knows that about me. And I come from a family of teachers, so I know a lot of hard work's been done. I do think this is a very incomplete plan. It just is. So let me say this. I was on the task force. I got to say, I was pretty disappointed with the task force because I really thought that was going to be an opportunity where, a lot of creative ideas would be shared. I was on the safety committee. I thought Kathy and Lisa were awesome. I think the whole task force, I guess probably the best thing that came out of that, it brought Dr. Sue to us, which I think was a huge positive for her working with the district. I wasn't able to go on the walkthroughs, but I was on every meeting, and I really just very rarely thought that we were trying to think out of the box and be creative about how to get kids to school. It really felt like that the plan was in place, which is fine. You guys had worked on a plan. I think the plan was in place, and then the task force was a way to roll out some ideas and see what, see if we could like help with the details. But the plan was kind of in place. So I say all that to ask, one, Angela, you said teachers were working on the hybrid model all summer. Did the high school teachers get to work on the hybrid model?
Yes.
Okay. So Andy, you had to have been planning for a hybrid model.
Yes.
Okay, so there is a plan. We're just not seeing it. But you do have a plan.
My plan for the hybrid needed to shift when the walkthroughs happened.
Okay.
The walkthroughs are what gave me the recognition made me realize that with having students walk throughout the building, that I was compromising the school and putting us in a position that we would have to close periodically throughout the year. So then trying to think differently about how you bring students back into the building.
Okay.
In a way that does shift mindset and really better educates around expectations. But then as I received that feedback and then started shifting the plan. Now we're talking, this is late July when all this was happening. My brain was on regular hybrid. And so that's why I have to say the task force has really kind of guided me towards this way.
Right.
Totally shifted my plan.
Okay.
So, or at least definitely my thinking. And that's when we got back together as a high school team and just started to think differently. Is there a way to cohort students so that if there were a problem, we're not in that position that I keep referring to, and that people can feel safe as a way to start. Because that's also what people were saying. If you can start smart and start well, you're going to be able to slowly increase how the plan evolves and increase student access to the building and to their teachers. And it just seems like so that's kind of where our planning went. That's where I was. I'll be honest with you. My brain was regular hybrid in terms of how other schools had thought, but then getting the feedback and and we did have complications with the class sizes. That was a big issue because even with the hybrid, so that was one of the things that I even shared with the team because one of our models was, do you go a third of the students in at a time? But then also what you're doing to the schedule is all 7 periods are meeting a day. A student is still only coming into the building once a week, but every single day is all 7 periods meeting. Made it difficult for us to put in the advisory period, which I do think is going to be important in terms of a check-in. But there was that question too, to what degree were we also sacrificing our teaching and learning for students. And so that was a big thing that started to kind of guide the thinking as well, which then led to, all right, well, maybe if we start with remote instruction and get really, really good at it at the student level, guided by the teachers, it just sets us up for greater success along the way. And then looking for ways to increase student in-person instruction with their teachers. And that's the main rationale behind the plan, is starting off small, but in a way that's very, very safe and provides controlled movement of students. But then it also sets us up to increase how many times they're in the building so teachers can coordinate, because now you're still talking very controlled movement as organized by the teacher versus students traveling around from one room to the next. We also have, it's not specifically in the plan, we just know that those first few days of school, we're going to kind of have a different type of schedule that brings grade levels in so they can meet their teachers, learn the expectations for the learning, get materials. So there's going to be some in-person opportunity on that week as well. We're going to do a freshman orientation, and then we'll organize time for sophomores, juniors, and seniors to come in as well. But in very small groups of students. That's manageable for the building to handle.
Can I just ask a follow-up just to that? And I guess it kind of goes to Sean too as well. So if that's the case, I guess I'd like to hear, because I didn't really hear a lot of creative things talked about in the task force, but like, we haven't been presented any budget, big budget asks to help make in-person learning work. So I'd like to hear some of the creative ideas that you ruled out, maybe because it was cost, maybe because staff didn't want it, maybe because it just wasn't feasible, but like things like, tenting the football field, or using other spaces on the school grounds, or using buildings in the city. I mean, there's a million things that, you go online, you can hear a million things people asking. But they haven't been addressed really, and they definitely weren't addressed in the task force, which I thought it would be. And again, no one got to see the task force because the videos haven't been posted and things like that. So I guess I'd just like to hear some of the thinking that went in, I guess, to ruling out some of these things and trying to get it. I guess I think we'll all agree in this room that the best option for kids is in-person learning. So I guess, there has to be a path there, and this plan doesn't have a path there. So I hope we can get to one.
Well, I think a lot of those scenarios you bring up, you got to follow the guidelines. So if we took half the first graders and put them, let's say, in, let's say the senior center.
Just to stop you real quick, I'm really just referring to the high school because I feel pretty good about the K-8 plan, and at least that's starting slow and getting kids into the classroom. I would love if all K-8 could go full-time too, and find a way to do that using outdoor spaces and things like that. But I guess I'm more specific to high school, and again, just getting creative and dealing with the schedule and the building. Just what kind of things we're talking around the high school to see if we can make this work. Again, we're talking about bringing about 180 kids in, like the freshman class, sophomore class, as they go through, and we're only going to use the bottom floor of the building. So again, I just want to hear that we're really thinking of everything that we could possibly do.
Yeah, and I think we're trying to mitigate the risk, right, in the spread. So we could vote full hybrid and bring people in and just let people know that, there's going to be a big risk for the staff and the students. And if there is a case in the school, then we would have to shut down for for the 2 weeks. But if we're looking for, I think when we're looking at space, and if you're going to look at other buildings and that, you're still going to need staff to go over there and teach those students, right? So you're splitting your staff. So if I say I need another 10 more classrooms or 15 more classrooms, then you're going to have to, staff that. Let's say it's the high school. You're going to staff that with, let's say, 12 high school teachers. Then you're going to need to staff that with the facilities, right? The cleaning protocols. You're going to have to staff that with nurses, right? All of that. Potentially temporarily, right? Because this is a fluid year. So if all of a sudden we can bring more students back, now you're going to take those students that were at another location, and then you're going to, bring them back into the fold without those, because you're not going to need those teachers.
Right.
So I think when we're looking at, and this isn't just for Newburyport, is extremely challenging because of, when we say the building, because not every single classroom is the same size like in other classes. And the same challenge here is also the same challenge for other high schools. The big piece is those three things: the cohorting, the contact tracing, and the isolation. So with this model, or the idea of this model, bring kids back, is you can control the movement by having teachers go to the cohort, grab their students, and then control the movement, so you're not having, even if you have 180 students in the building, or 400 in the building, whatever it is, if they follow that 7 period or the 4 period, they're leaving those classrooms and then going off to other areas.
But I totally get what you're saying, but the way you're talking about it, there is no path to ever getting to in-person learning, because those things won't change.
I think there is. With the idea,
the data's not going to get better, right?
What's that?
The data's not going to get better, right? Maybe. I mean, I hope it does. I mean, it'd be great if we had 2 less people with COVID in the city, but
I think I
just don't see a path.
I think it's exactly what Kathy, Ricky, we're all saying. I think once we have a slow, successful start, people are following the protocols, people are used to the protocols, then you can start bringing more students in with success.
I just wondered if it would be possible to use the senior center for some of the clipper blocks to get the students in.
absolutely
It's
not.
not. Why?
Because this was made for seniors. They waited 2.5
This is
decades.
an emergency. This is not, these are extenuating circumstances.
And they're not coming anyway.
Yeah, they will be.
By September 16th?
No.
Well, actually.
And just for the first 2 weeks to get the kids in every week as opposed to every other week.
Sean, can I ask you a question? You mentioned contact tracing a bunch of times. There's a bunch of other schools, similar communities in Newburyport, that are starting full hybrid from K to 12. Have we called them to see how they're doing their contact tracing, I guess scheduling, however they're planning to do that plan? Do we know how Beverly or somebody's doing it? Or do we not know that?
Well, I know a lot of the hybrid people at the high school have moved to full remote. But the difference, I think the difference with us is...
But there are districts that are going
There are
full hybrid. Have we contacted them to see what their contact tracing protocols are?
I don't think they're... I don't want to talk to other districts.
No,
I'm
asking if we contacted anybody else to see
Yes.
it there.
Yes.
So we contacted them to say, hey, Tingsboro, what's your contact?
How do you contact trace? How do you isolate a case? How do you do those things? We ask those same questions, and there's no specific answers how to get around those three things, other than willingness to take a bigger risk. I think what we've been talking about, it gives us that ability to get kids into the building and minimize those risks.
And I think Sean says it well right there. It's the willingness of the risk, which, if we want to move towards that point, we can do. But it's recognizing that I think that if we're going to do that, now having gone through all this summer and participating and listening to the whole idea of the contact tracing and why it's important, that it's very important for students and teachers to be adept at the remote instruction, because you're putting your school in a position where you will be shutting down.
Andy, is there, I know that you guys have run through 482 different scenarios in the work that you've done. Is there a scenario of starting slowly with hybrid, even with the cohorts you're talking about, that will allow kids to have the full high school schedule, the full schedule, like electives, the whole 9 yards? Can you bring kids in early and give them the full schedule? Is that possible?
You mean in terms of bringing like a hybrid model?
Yeah. My question, let me see if I can make it more clear. Is it possible to bring kids into the high school, even in cohorts of 180 or whatever, and ensure that we can safely manage their getting through a 7-block schedule?
Yeah, I've got models where you have a quarter of your students coming to the building. They're running A through all 7 periods. But I think what you then struggle with, especially if you start that way, is students are on their own for 3 days out of the week. You are going to have one day where everybody's teaching remotely, right? So you have your day that you're coming in as a student. It's my day, it's my quarter day. I'm running through all 7 periods. I have my live instruction for 40, 45 minutes. But then there's 3 days where it might be more asynchronous work that I'm doing. So I'm kind of managing the time on my own. And then on the day that there's all virtual, I'm getting my live instruction again. So there is that model. We have one where you can potentially do it in thirds, but it's still the same situation. You're coming in for one day, and then you have your 1 day of full virtual. The nice thing about the thirds, you could actually have 2 days of virtual at least, so live instruction.
I'm sorry, I have one more question about contact tracing, Superintendent. I don't want to keep going at it, but I was thinking, I've been to Brook and Ash a whole bunch of times since we've been allowed to eat outside. And they just say, what's your name? What's your phone number? But isn't that at the end of the day the Board of Health's job to do the contact tracing, not the school's responsibility?
No, they can't do contact tracing unless someone identifies the positive case.
Okay, so say we get a positive case in the school at one point.
Mm-hmm.
That's not his problem to go find out who that kid talked to. That's our Board of Health's job, right? Or is that not right?
Well, it's not in isolation. You can't say it's just the Board of Health has to. I mean, they certainly are working on that, but...
I guess my question is, if that did happen, how is it that a restaurant can take my name and phone number, and I could potentially be from a town 100 miles from here, but it's somehow difficult for the school, who knows exactly where that kid lives, and who with, and all those other things, hey, you gotta tell us who you were hanging out with yesterday. Like, why is that seeming so difficult for us to do?
Is it so much, who did you hang out with yesterday, or which kids did you pass in the hallway? Do you know who they are?
Well, that's still, but they still know. The kids went from between math to English to this. I mean, they know a general pathway. And again, it's still, is it just asking? And I keep going back to this, Andy, I'm sorry, but I still don't see the initial 3-week thing having any change on any of metrics or anything like that. I just don't get it. And quite honestly, Mayor, seniors waited 20 years for this building. They can wait 3 months if we could use it and actually solve a whole lot of our problems and have these kids in a gigantic room that's empty.
Andy, is it conceivable that you could bring kids in more in their Clifford cohorts if you had space to be able to do that? Is that...
With greater frequency?
Yeah.
We could transport the teachers. I mean, the other part is for the students who are working virtually, the idea is that they're also being able to schedule extra help at that time as well. By having the one cohort that's in, so you have a group of 12 teachers that are downstairs working on the advisory lessons when your whole rest of the staff is running their advisory, but then setting up students to schedule their extra help opportunities with teachers.
Can I point out a process thing for the district and the committee here? It's very difficult for us to look at this tonight, or maybe a few days ago for the first time, and tonight be hearing even more information about this. I'm not sure why we weren't having discussions throughout the summer. If you guys have had 100 versions of this and all schedules,
we've seen one.
It's too late now, but boy, it would have been nice to talk about some of them. Because, like, having done scheduling, it's really tough to envision without looking at it and walking through it. You know, like Angela, what you were talking about earlier, I really have no idea what you were talking about. And I do scheduling for a living. It's tough to do without seeing it. And so us taking a vote and trying to understand what you're talking about, we really should be involved in the thinking process that leads up to our votes instead of just our votes. And I know we're not, as Mr. Menon will always point out, we are not statutorily involved in school logistics and operations, but here we are with the biggest decision likely to be made for school operations and logistics coming down to a vote, and we're trying to figure out things by asking you questions that we should have been asking months ago. What are we going to do when we try to restart in September? And so it's kind of, I guess it's just a little frustrating.
I think part of the problem, though, Dave, I understand, and I think we're all sensing the anxiety in the community about the high school, but I think part of the problem was dealing with the state and DESE and the guidelines. I mean, Tuesday, you come out with plans saying that everyone should have all in, but that's insane.
I understand.
10 days before graduation, they come out with guidelines, you know, when everyone's planned things. I mean, this has been a very difficult process working with DESE. I don't think there's any question about it. You, working in the school systems, must know that too.
Trust me, I'm on hold.
I think as a result, because of so many of these, constantly changing scenarios, is that you look at the map that's been released today, thank you, Sheila, that talks about, the majority of schools across the district are doing, across the state are doing hybrid. I think there's only one small school district at this juncture doing all in to start.
Well, they have a choice. It's either all in or
all remote, yes. And, and I think, a lot of schools, even in this area, are going remote. And part of it is because teachers aren't coming back or want to come back. So I think that, sort of finding that balance between, what, Mr. Wolf is saying, I think what you're hearing from, Joan Sheehan, the president of the teachers, is that, and from Kathy, that there needs to be a little bit of a transition time for high school. You look at the kids, they go in to see their teacher, K through 8, they're in the same cohort, same teacher, same group. The minute they step away from that social distancing mark, they've got a teacher with them. You've got to have some time to train the high school kids. I'm sorry, but they are the worst in terms of compliance with masks, with rules.
I would say the adults in our town are equally as awful when you go downtown. So I'm not going to start laying out teenagers, but I can tell you that I'm more comfortable in a small cohort or in a small, with 170 kids masked in a high school than I am with 300 people eating unmasked at Tuscan. And we still have really low numbers, and I think that's our point. And I know they might raise, but if we're going off safety guidelines that are supposedly working, and we believe in them, and we think we can do it in the beginning of October, I just don't see it why we're waiting. I don't see it. And I know you say there's like software that we want to teach them how to use. These kids will pick that up pretty quickly. The scheduling software, whatever that is, I just get the sense that, and we have a month.
Right.
We have a month from now to get all this up and running. I'm struggling with it.
Mr. Reard, ask a couple. I'm going to give Andy a break.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to give you a break.
Okay.
I just had a couple of general questions. I know we're 1-to-1, 6 to 8 for technology at the middle school. I was very fortunate. My 3 kids were able to take a Chromebook home. I have kids at the Brisbane, Mullen, and the Knock. So what are we going to be able to do something like that for kids again? Are we going to run out? Are we close to 1-on-1 in grades 1 through 5? Just curious, yeah.
Yeah. We are close grades 3 through 8. I'm looking over at Don because I know he has all those numbers. He probably doesn't have them on the top of his head. We're working to get more student machines as we talk. We've got a couple of different avenues that we're traveling to try to get there. But we will definitely have enough devices for families who need to borrow, based on our numbers that we had from the spring. We kept data of how many devices were borrowed, how many families needed it. We also kept data about how many families needed hotspots that didn't have access to internet. We are expanding our broadband so that our capacity to stream is going to be double what it is now. So Don and his team have worked very hard over the summer, really looking at our numbers closely, trying to ensure that we'll have the technology that we need to do this work.
Are we thinking about giving the devices to the families who need them? Like I could see, we have 3 kids in the house and only 1 computer, or 4 kids and 2 computers, so we'll lend you one. But we have families, I'm assuming here in Newburyport, who don't have devices and don't have internet. Are we budgeting to give them machines?
We did not budget for that, but we did budget to make sure they have a device that they need to fully participate in school, and we did budget to get them internet service in their house.
Can we at some point, and I've been asking this for years now, can we start thinking about identifying families in need as soon as they come in the district and giving them devices? because even if they're kindergarten kids who aren't going to use the device, getting a family on the device is only going to benefit the family and the kid and the district.
I think that's something we could talk about at a later date, but right now.
I think I've been bringing it up every year for 6 years now. Can we please do that?
Dave's reminding me of a question I have about prioritized populations. Will that include economically disadvantaged students? When we talk about the prioritized populations for in-person learning?
Yeah, so we've been working with especially a lot of the students that struggled with the remote learning over the spring. But yeah, those specialized populations definitely looking to bring in. Yeah.
I had another question for Angela. So again, you know, a lot of things has been said about how remote learning went in the spring. And so again, I have complete faith in our staff. I'd like to say that first. But it is a leap of faith thinking that it's going to be better in the spring. I mean, when we go back in the fall. So what kind of accountability measures are going to be put into place, I guess, to work with our teachers on the quality of remote learning? And I'm going to guess our new teacher leadership model is going to be a big part of that, but I just would love to hear what kind of things have been put in place.
So I think there will be, we've talked a lot about the professional development that's happened over the summer and that the work that the teachers have done over the summer. Part of our plan around our hybrid model is to also have our faculty in our buildings even when they're teaching remote, so that all of the support systems in the district are available to them during that time. So that's one way that we're planning to support the teachers. Our teacher leaders will certainly be a part of that. Any of the support staff that we have in the buildings will be a part of that. The principals, who are their supervisors, will be a part of that. We're going to be talking about what the needs are as we go along, because everybody's talking about how the situation outside of the district is fluid. It's fluid inside too. We need to continually grow and provide the supports that are needed as we go along, because the situations are going to change, you know, throughout the year. Hopefully we'll be adding more, we'll be bringing students in more frequently, and that will change the models that the teachers are using. But you know, as I've talked with the instructors from the technology classes this summer, they have a lot of built-in supports moving forward, because they know what the teachers are working on, they know the kinds of things that they're trying. So I think, you know, that we're going to continue to work with our staff and continue with our staff development our first 10 days as we talk with teachers around their needs, as we talk about the kinds of things that we're incorporating this year. We're going to work collaboratively to make sure that they've got the supports they need to do this work.
Angela, can I just follow up?
Sure.
On Sean's question? Obviously, there's a supervision model that exists in schools. What role do you see, or what role do the principals see for themselves in terms of monitoring the online work that teachers are doing?
Any principals want to comment on that?
I don't mind speaking to that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for the middle school, I will say that,
Could you go to the mic?
yeah.
I need to take a walk. I think for the middle school, it's not going to be that dissimilar to what we normally put in place, and that is we have kind of layers in place. So we have our teacher leadership layer, which allows us to develop curriculum and look at it vertically by department. We have our grade level teams where we meet every week. We talk about students, we talk about data, we look for growth. We talk to our students, and you know, I think for middle school we're starting to get kind of a better practice in place in terms of looking to our young people about what's successful, what's not successful. So whether a teacher is successful in the classroom, I think, has so many layers to it. Teaching is a craft and a skill that develops over time, and we give feedback to each other as colleagues. We look, I think, the administrative team to give really specific and concrete feedback to people that we think need to grow in particular areas. And then together as a school community, we have shared goals that are a part of the Massachusetts teacher evaluation system. And those shared goals have every year come from the district goals down to the school level. And last year, for example, our goals were around student voice, around the areas of looking at data and specifically addressing some of the concerns that people have addressed tonight in regards to populations of students who are not thriving and lessening the gap in some of those areas. So I don't know if that's like directly answering. I just think indirectly enhancing the quality of teaching is a school culture approach that in the long run I think takes a longer time. I know I've spoken to a lot of people here about like it's going to take us time, but I think it allows for the administrative team to walk away and know that in that room is what you expected to have had happen, whether that room is a room remotely or a room in our building. Hopefully then we're all on the same page for that.
Other questions? Mr. Cole.
Yeah, this is for Mr. Wolf, and it's more of a compliment than it is a question. Because I remember when you first came to the district, I think it was in July of 2018, but you had spent a lot of time in the spring coming up and getting to know everybody. And one of the things that got my attention about you happened in the fall when you changed a bunch of rules. And I actually got a lot of feedback from parents about it. But what I was really impressed was how you, and Ms. Furlong mentioned, how you really underscored the importance of student voice, the things that you did to get buy-in. And then tonight when you're talking about things like key considerations, such as, reducing the disruptions in learning, starting small, allowing teachers to organize students, controlling the movement. I mean, I started thinking about that, things you went through back in July, and you certainly proved to me, and I know that Mr. Testa, I don't want to leave Mr. Testa out of there because Mr. Testa was probably gave you some good information and introduced you to the district and things like that. But I guess I just want to say I have faith in you and what you're doing. And one of the things that I want to come out of this with, and I liked how you mentioned the comment about the person who said measure twice, cut once. My father was a wooden boat builder by trade, a perfectionist, so to speak, so I knew all about that. But I just want to say that one of the things that I'd like to see us as a school district come out of this with is that we're all rowing in the same direction. Because it's a difficult time as it is. And I don't think, and I don't know if we're going to make everybody happy, but the key thing is doing the best thing for our school community. And I just want to say in terms of the high school, I've watched the things you've gone through. I've watched Mr. Testa, and I think I have faith that you'll be able to get things done within your vision. So I wish you a lot of luck.
So is it possible, I mean, I know I feel like we're sort of stuck here about the high school, but is it possible that we could give Mr. Wolf and his team the benefit of the doubt that he needs 2 weeks to orientate and bring the students in to increase more face-to-face, and that we keep, every 2 weeks that we meet, we need to have a update on how we're doing and where things are going at this point?
How about we give them 2 weeks, like September 2nd, to come back with a hybrid plan that might go?
Well, you got the teachers in until the 16th, right, or for that 10 days, right?
So that's right around when that 10 days would start. So you're still 2 weeks before school starts on September 2nd.
Is that doable for you, Mr. Wolf, in terms of coming up with you know, what you talked about in terms of implementing October 5th, could you now start working on that to have that happen on the 16th or within the next week? Maybe they need a week to sort of transition people in.
So are you saying, Sean, starting with a grade level coming in for 2 full days, the first full week of school?
I'm saying that there seems to be a lot of consensus around the K-8 plan, so I would actually feel pretty comfortable voting for that tonight. I still don't think we have a pathway to in-person learning. I don't think we have metrics. I don't think we have a timeline. I think it's all just people talking right now. So I would suggest maybe we see if we have some consensus on the K-8 plan, maybe vote that possibly tonight with the idea of Mr. Wolf coming back on September 2nd with a hybrid plan that could start 2 weeks later on the first day of school to bring kids back. And then by then, we also will hear a clear timeline and what metrics we'll use. Because I know we've all talked about what's it going to take to get us to in-person learning, but we haven't talked anything about what's it going to take to make everybody remote. And that could be like no cases happening in the schools, but you know, a bunch of 20-year-olds had a party out on the beach, and then all of a sudden we've got 15, 20 cases in Newburyport, and all of a sudden our numbers spike up. So again, our color would probably change on that map that the governor has provided. So I mean, I think that goes both ways. I think we have to have metrics to say, this is what's going to happen, and if this happens when the data comes out, we're going to have to pull everyone into full remote, or we're going to have data lined up to get our kids back to full-time school. Because, you know, again, we've had a lot of months here where we've done a lot of good work here in Newburyport. So again, you know, you get data 2 weeks out, right? So in September 2nd, we still have 2 weeks until school starts. The K-8 teachers have now had 2 weeks to start their planning. It does put the high school teachers in a little bit of limbo until then, but I mean, I think they could work collaboratively and come back with a plan. And then I say we take a vote on the high school plan and then vote on the metrics that will be in place to, you know, kind of guide us through the rest of this year.
I hear what you're saying, but I guess I'm stuck on the fact that I think you have an idea about how to do the grade level for 2 days at a time. And I'm wondering if that first week, the 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th, if you couldn't have a grade level in that day in an advisory capacity, going through some of those protocols for a day, meeting the teachers, learning software, and then on Monday, the 21st of September, we start with a hybrid plan.
Which we'd have to, you know, obviously see first.
And then in between that, we still have a month for the superintendent and the leadership team to start thinking about those other metrics, because that's going to change. I mean, soon enough, sports are going to be announced.
Yep.
Right? We might say that the kids can't be in class, but they're going to be on a soccer field together for 3 hours, sweating all over each other, right? For all we know what the state's going to say about sports. So, like,
I'm just concerned about our timing, and I know that...
Yeah, so can we pull that off?
I feel confident in my ability to pull it off. I do get nervous in terms of I do think the whole minimizing the disruption to teaching learning, I feel that that's important, and being able to equip the teachers to manage that and to allow me to manage the teachers in delivering it is important. Can I pull that off? I think so. But I do think there's going to be a sacrifice. But if that's the direction that we want to go, then I can make that happen. Because I've talked to everybody just about who's emailed you guys, and I get it. I understand.
I mean, I'll go back to something, and I know this is a little off topic, so I apologize, but like I'm looking through the state opening guidelines, and it's suggested here that we prioritize early learners, pre-K through 5th. And why? Because those kids can't do anything independently. Right? As soon as those kids leave the building, we're talking about parents having to manage their day. And so that's what makes me most nervous. So when we talk about sacrifices, I'm always thinking about a first grader and a first grader's family who are trying to figure something out, and it's going to be enormous on them. And the reality is if we were going to say that we're going to dump all of the district's resources into our K through 5 students and everyone else is going to be remote, I would happily make that sacrifice. But if we're saying that everyone's going to be remote, everyone's going to be hybrid, I think the sacrifice you're talking about will get worked out pretty quickly, because I think I'm going to agree with Steve. I think you've been a strong leader. I think Mr. Testa's been a strong leader, and I think we have a strong faculty. So look, it might be wonky. It's going to be wonky. Let's just say it, right? But I think that's something we can do, and I think it's going to be less outrageous than what we're asking of our kindergarten through fourth grade families. Because to me, those are the kids that keep me up at night. Because we've had no conversation about even doing that. And I tell you again, if in June Mr. Gallagher would have said, "Hey guys, what do you think? Let's get the little kids back," and everyone else is going remote, I would have been like, absolutely. Because those kids can't do anything, and the early learners learning how to read, learning how to think, like, I think the kids taking AP classes and writing college essays will figure out a way. And I have the older kids.
If I could ask Sean a question, that my own gut feeling is we need to leave here tonight with a plan. What do you think would happen if we were to try to sever the plan and just send in K-8 tomorrow to Desi and tell them that we'd like to take some time?
I mean, so we're looking at the high school, and in June, just so everyone knows, in June we are developing the safety protocols and bringing our summer school kids in. So we were focusing on that for success. So with Mr. Wolf's proposal, so the idea is to get comfortable. The idea in working with Mike Gallard, another person who's phenomenal, who developed all the protocols in Boston. But he also said as you start, you can develop the best plans, but you got to see what it looks like. And then you make adjustments as you go along. And I think the idea, so right now we have a theory, right? We haven't seen it in action, that we can take that advisory, break them into cohorts, put them throughout that first floor, do our contact tracing and control. For me, I would like to see what that looks like first. If that's a week or 2 weeks, and then bring the classes in off of that, I think would be beneficial. But if school committee moves to take that idea, and that's going to be the hybrid model, then obviously we have to make it work.
Can I make a motion?
Wait, hold on a second. Let me just, I want to clarify what Sean's saying. So, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. So, are you saying bring in this test of cohorts and contact tracing and everything on the first day and for 2 weeks and see how it goes, or still have the kind of, oddball, not real school for 2 weeks, but advisory periods where a lot of kids are not going to attend, by the way.
Yeah,
and then the next set of 2 weeks with people in, and then
No, I was saying take the 2 weeks of the proposed plan, utilize that advisory, because that's going to be really...
But starting when?
I would, starting the first week of school, the first 2 weeks of school. And then you expand, just like we take that advisory, we expand it into grade levels and for 2 days.
So not starting the first 2 to 3 weeks fully remote?
No, I'm saying utilizing, well, they're going remote with their academics and that advice.
You're still saying the same thing, fully remote, and then 2 weeks later...
We have a hybrid model.
So I'm still at the same impasse.
Because I still think you need to take a look at that to make sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think,
Can I make a motion?
Sure.
Great. I want to move that, knowing that it's all necessarily flexible and dependent on health metrics, because I don't want anybody thinking that we're going forward with the plan regardless of what we find out in town. I would like to move that we bring in pre-K through 12 in a fully hybrid model, with the 15th through the 18th at the high school being held aside for grade level advisory days, we'll call them, or grade level clipper days. And starting with their classes on the 21st.
Second.
Discussion. This discussion, I just want to confirm, because we're saying that a lot of the same things over and over again.
Yep.
Your motion is that we do not have the fully remote introduction.
That's right. We have one day, clipper days. Freshmen would come in 15th, sophomores 16th, juniors 17th, and seniors 18th. Acclimate, meet teachers, do whatever it is that wants to get done, and then their classes start on the 21st.
Still only the 2 day.
Right, so on average, it's like 1 day a week, which would have been similar to other models that we were doing with the third or the quarter.
It's 1 day a weekend, it's not 2?
It's 2 days in a row, but it's every other week.
Why is that? It would be every 8 days.
So for example, if we go back to, so let's say Monday is day 1, Tuesday is day 2, all 8 classes meet. So let's say the freshmen are in for Monday, Tuesday. Everybody else is at home.
Yep.
Now Wednesday, Thursday would be the sophomores.
Right, so every 8 days it rotates.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's every other week that you're in for 2 days in a row.
So it could be.
I just don't want you to think that, I just didn't want you to think that, all right, everybody's coming in for 2 days every day, every week.
Yes.
And then that, and even that is a temporary thing to see what's happening? Or that is it for the whole June?
I don't know. And the way I look at it, and I think Sean looks at it a similar way, is that, you know, I think as we're getting really good at the work and we are becoming more comfortable, and it just comes down to what's the risk level that we want to take. Because this system that we've put in place really does minimize us having to shut down, because you're limiting exposure risk is what you're doing. That's the whole idea of this plan.
Yeah, I had one question about the calendar. Were you saying that would Fridays be all remote for everyone?
Correct.
So that would be a challenge with the district calendar as far as
Or
making.
actually, we could probably make it make it Wednesday.
Okay.
Because that way we can at least separate the 2 cohorts.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
How many, we have one Monday holiday, right? Columbus Day?
Columbus Day.
Yeah.
October.
Yeah. And then are we still married to the election day half day? Or can we get rid of that just because of this?
I think I'll have to look at our calendar. I'm not sure if we did the election day, but I know we did.
Well, it's a Tuesday.
Yeah, we did get rid of some of those.
Election day still on there.
Once
I think election day was, but the other ones were off.
The way we left this conversation, I thought, was that once we figured out what the plan was, we were going to revisit the calendar.
Okay.
And make decisions about half-days and whatnot.
Right, okay.
So that was the idea. Once we settled on a plan, we would review the calendar.
Right, so we'll have to, only because since it's so, I know it's very fluid, but the Monday, Tuesday kids are going to have an extra 2 days not in the building because of that.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we're going to take a look at the calendar.
Okay.
Does anybody have any other comments they'd like to make?
Xfinity, will you call the roll, please?
Did someone second that motion?
Yes, Sean did.
Are we still discussing?
If you want. Done.
I just want to make sure we're all on the same page before we say yes.
So we're going to go through pre-K through 12, the hybrid model, the high school's hybrid model as initially presented. Those first 4 days, the 15th to the 18th, are going to be clipper days, where the kids will come in for advisory and for acclimation. And then their classes will start with that Monday, the 21st.
With in-person learning.
With in-person learning, 2 days per grade level.
Every other week.
Before we call, I would have a comment. In these votes and going forward with significant votes like this, I personally plan to explain why I'm voting the way I'm voting. So I am opposed to this and will vote no on this. And the reason that I am voting no on this is that we have developed a collaborative plan that has involved everybody, parents, it's involved students, it's involved teachers. That plan has been codified and delivered. It is not the ideal plan, but it is the recommendation of the district, it is the recommendation of the high school staff, and given that we know that this is flexible and adjustable, and we have conversations about metrics, and we have conversations about when we should instruct Andy to go ahead, I think what he is asking is reasonable, and I plan to vote no. So you can call the question, if you'd like.
Well, I guess if we're going to explain myself, I'm going to vote yes, because I still can't get my head around that it's going to take high school kids 2 weeks to get used to doing any of this. Medically, and this is from Dr. Sue, who we trust implicitly, high school kids are not known to be more asymptomatic than elementary kids, and usually it's from 10 and up, are in the same basically asymptomatic group, if you will. I just don't think there's a medical reasoning for a delay, and I think this is a good option to not have them dumped in all in one go, still get the training you were talking about, and not have them be another 2 weeks of potentially never being in the building at all, or 3 weeks or whatever it was. So I'm going to vote yes.
I am also going to vote yes for 3 reasons. I like that these plans are equitable and that they consider all students, including students on 504 plans and students who are economically disadvantaged. I also am voting on this based on the science and respect for Dr. Sue and for all of the people who have been planning this all summer.
I too will be voting yes. I think this checks off a lot of boxes for me. I still think we need definitely a pathway to in-person learning. So I hope after this vote we can make another vote on setting up a kind of a clear timeline going forward, and what kind of metrics that'll be used to either pull to fully remote or to actually increase the in-person learning even more. But I think this is a good start. I think we've had a good conversation tonight. I know there's going to be some high school teachers that are going to be pretty disappointed about this, but I hope this next month we can all really work together. I know Andy's going to do a great job in working with his staff. He's been a real advocate for them. And I just do think, this gives us some time to, put a good model together. And again, we're still going to be getting data throughout this whole process. So, it gives us a month to hopefully put some good systems in place. So I'll be voting yes.
I'm going to vote yes. I think it's a good mix of what we talked about. I think, like I said, I think any plan we come up with is going to be a little weird at the start. But wonky. But I think the staff is going to do a good job pulling it off. I think the students are going to rise because it seems to be what everybody wants. Bruce, I kind of disagree. I don't think it's been a collaborative process. I know I was in 4 of the task force models, and we never had an essential question. We never had a goal. We never came up with a product at the end of our conversation. We kind of just talked a lot, which is fine. But I don't know who played a role in coming up with the plans. I know there were surveys, but I don't know. So I like this plan. I do want us to think about, as a school committee, whether, especially August is a 5-Monday month, so whether we could/should have a few more meetings to have some discussions about things like, Sean, we talked about there might be some policy implications to this that we have to write out. We might want to think about the calendar. We might want to think about transportation, a lot of things that the quicker we can get to, the better we can support the staff with. Budget votes, I don't know if we're about to have a budget discussion now or not, but it's midnight. So I think we still have a lot of things to talk about. I ask deferentially, Mr. Wolf, if you could take a look at the email I sent tonight, which has a layout of a plan that's got 2 days per grade level, but it talks about asynchronous days, because I think those are going to be really important to build in. Days where kids are not locked into that screen all day long. I just think that's really important. So I'm voting yes, too.
Well, I think we've come to a compromise. I would have preferred to have given the high school to the 5th to be able to have that little more time to be a little more flexible, but I think we also need to acknowledge the number of emails and number of families that are really concerned about the high school education. And so with where we are tonight versus the timeline, and I appreciate you being so honest with us and forthcoming that you can try and move this forward. And I think we should definitely meet in 2 weeks. But I will support this vote tonight. I don't think we can wait. I mean, that's the problem, because it's too difficult for parents at this point if we don't take a vote on our full plan. I'm also concerned that Superintendent Gallagher's conversation with the commissioner was saying that we can't separate the plan, we can't make a hybrid plan, separate it out, and that if we don't vote the whole K through 12, that there's a potential we could be identified as fully remote.
Can I make a comment on that? So I reached out to Jim Pelcourse today, who reached out to Secretary Pizer, and he pretty much just disputed all of that. He said we would be able to vote. We actually would be able to split the vote tonight. We would be able to submit just a KA plan if we chose to, and we could have set it, as long as we had a solid plan in place before school started.
And this is the problem.
Well, I know, so you're getting two things. I mean, that's why I felt like I needed to...
Superintendent's one thing, and you have the Secretary of Education telling people another thing, and this has been the problem we've dealt with all along throughout this whole COVID
I get that. I just needed to hear from somebody else, I guess. Yeah.
That's fine.
So I'll just add my comment. In hearing all the discussion and, realizing that we're not that far away from a Labor Day holiday where I anticipate groups of people getting together, I am a little leery about starting sooner as opposed to later. I think that, again, I like what Mr. Wolf said about the key considerations around disruptions to learning, but I guess I'm going to cautiously vote yes, but hold that I think we really need to make sure we have some good ways to check students and staff before they get into school. Check whatever vitals are appropriate to make sure they're not, they haven't, contracted the virus. I think that's going to be really important. So I don't know if that's in the plans. I know you and I briefly had an informal discussion about it. So I will vote yes, but again, I only do so recognizing the fact that things could change. Things could change, and I think if things change, then we're going to have to put our heads together again. So
I guess we're good.
Call the vote.
Roll call. Mr. Cole?
yes.
Mr. Reardon?
Yes.
Mr. Callahan?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkeizer?
Yes.
Ms. Spalding?
Yes.
Mayor Holliday?
Yes.
And Mr. Menon?
No.
6-1.
Mayor Holliday, do we need a budget discussion and vote now or no?
The only reason that,
Is that our vote to approve the plan as amended? Because that's not the way the motion was made. We need to vote on a plan tonight.
There was a plan.
there was a plan.
That's the plan. We just voted for hybrid plans.
We just wanted to hybrid.
A full hybrid model.
Full hybrid model.
Yeah, with the dates that Dave laid out.
Mr. Hawkeizer?
Yep.
Would you think before you leave, so I get that
Yep.
wording right?
Yep.
And I just want to address just a couple things. I appreciate the committee vote. We have been working with Dr. Sue in developing a criteria for metrics. So we want to fine tune that, but that will be easily to be released. And then my other question is, my two conversations with the commissioner personally, are we saying that that I was not accurate with what I said, or?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I wasn't entirely clear with Bruce's email because he was, and is it okay if I respond? Yeah, so I wasn't entirely clear with Bruce's email, so I was just looking for clarification. So that's why I went looking for information. So we were hearing it secondhand as is. So that's why I was just asking for clarification.
Secretary Pfizer said something different than the commissioner said, but, that's par for the course.
So that's, and this is exactly what the commissioner said. You vote for a hybrid, but you can tweak as you move on, and not.
And we anticipate doing lots of tweaking as we go forward and get more kids in school.
Right.
Okay, so the
Thank you.
last budget item is, the last item on the agenda is the budget. And the reason it's here is because we had passed the budget on the 23rd. We had done our public hearing. We had done our due diligence. But there was a couple additional votes that happened down the road. And we just wanted to put a clean, clear copy of the budget together for everybody. And in addition to that, you had received information about the COVID expenses and the reopening as attachments to that. So that's all. We just wanted to be sure that everybody had the same document, that this is the document that Nancy posted today online, so that everyone can access the budget and this reopening package with the grants that we received. That's all. And I didn't know if, because this was a final document, if you wanted to take a final confirmatory vote or not. I mean, you voted for all of this, we don't really need to, but...
It actually matters. Nancy, I suggest you send a proxy next time.
Sorry, what?
You should send a proxy. You've been here for 5 hours.
More.
I was the only one that voted against it, so again, I'm in the minority, so if everyone's okay, just pass it in.
So do we need something legally? No?
I wanted to be sure that everyone had the most up-to-date packet on the budget and the care grants. That's all, just help support the operation of the school. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you, everyone. This is a long,
This is your Newburyport town.
good one.